tank. He's got a sizable tank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham and we are here. It is Tuesday, the 1st of July, ladies and gentlemen. We are well into the summer now. It's rather warm. It's very lovely. It's Wimbledon week, of course. It just started up. Great day for the Brits, apparently, yesterday, some of which I saw on my television. Peter Plexy's here with us to look through some of the big stories in the papers this morning. And I'm afraid, once again, it doesn't look like very good reading for the Prime Minister. And the only person who's rivalling him for numpty of the month so far, on the 1st of the month, is Tim Davie, the head of the BBC, who's coming under all sorts of pressure to either sort out the BBC that he runs or fall on his sword and finally resign. But also, the big story this morning and the big political debate, I suppose, later on will be the welfare bill, because on the front page of pretty much every newspaper there is a problem for Sir Keir Starmer. As he comes up to 1 year in office, as he comes up to celebrate or commemorate at the very least 1 year of his government, people are beginning to ask questions, just exactly how bad is this guy going to be? Labour rebels accuse Starmer of breaking welfare promises, it says on the front page of the Times. Daily Mail, rebel MPs are set to humiliate the Prime Minister today. His welfare U-turn has fallen flat. And of course, on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Starmer's benefit deal with rebels unravels. So it's all a bit chaotic for poor old Keir Starmer. Meanwhile, on the BBC front, after the debacle of Glastonbury, BBC boss at Festival for Rappers Hate Chant, it turned out that not only did Tim Davie know what was going out on the BBC when those terrible, awful, ghastly chants were being made, death, death to the IDF, he was actually there at Glastonbury at the time. Yeah, not only was he there, he actually received a phone call from the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy, who said, "What on earth are you doing? I'm just watching this. Why aren't you pulling the plug?" And he's going, "Sorry, I can't hear for all the noise. Just another gin and tonic, please. Thank you very much indeed." So that's Tim Davie for you. Meanwhile, what else is going on? Oh, yeah, NHS will prioritise UK doctors and nurses. That's nice. Apparently, under the current plan at the NHS, more than 2/3 of the doctors that we hire are actually from foreign parts. Incredible. And one especially for Peter Blexley, just nicked. Did somebody say just nicked? Front page of the Sun, a brilliant headline. Immigration cops began a crackdown on illegal delivery riders yesterday after the Sun blew the lid on a nationwide racket. And there's pictures of police swooping on these Deliveroo, Just Eat and Uber Eats people with their bikes just outside one of the migrant hotels which they're being put up in. Very nice too. 0344 499 1000. Apparently there's one other story that you really should know about. Apparently cheese really does cause nightmares. So if you're woken up this morning wondering what on earth that was all about last night, could have been the toasted cheese. 0344 499 1000. Text us at 87222. You can find us at talkTV, of course. I'm Mike Graham. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And a very good morning to Peter Blexley. How nice to see you looking very resplendent in such hot weather. You know, people are wandering about in shorts, wearing, you know, what you might call summer tops, but not you and not me. Suited and booted, professionally.
Well, thank you, Governor. Standards matter.
They do.
A pinch and a punch for the first day of the month.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now, it's 2025, so whatever you do, don't do that in the workplace.
No.
Even if it's in jest.
Yes.
Even if it's the gentlest
You can only
pinch
say it now, can't you?
and the tiniest punch,
Yeah.
or else that will end up in a tribunal, probably.
It probably will, and you could end up losing your job altogether. But
Yeah.
don't worry, it'd be all right if you work for the BBC, though, 'cause it's very difficult to lose your job there. Because it doesn't matter how bad things are, doesn't matter how terrible management becomes, or what people do. You can, you know, be soliciting people on your phone while you're reading the news. You can be sending pictures of your backside to people while you're reading the news. You could be encouraging anti-Semitic behaviour down at a music festival where you've got 500 employees all having a great time. Nothing ever happens to you.
Mike, you're a veteran
Yeah.
broadcaster, OK? And I've been knocking around this media
Yes.
world for 25
Not
years
too
or
bad.
so.
Yeah.
So we both know that when it comes to live broadcasting, there is invariably a dump button
Yes.
or some other mechanism
Yes.
through which, with a built-in time delay,
Yeah.
the minute somebody starts spouting something,
Yeah.
which is utterly unacceptable, you can pull the plug on it,
Yeah.
you can cut to something else, play an advert,
Yeah.
go to a presenter,
Yeah.
leave a test card.
It's not, especially if you've got 500 people in a position to help you out to do that.
Of course,
Right.
it's so basic and simple. And as a producer from another media outlet said to me, Peter, he said, I know all about the dump button. He said, my finger hovers over it whenever you're speaking. Right? So, yeah, everybody in broadcasting knows these facilities
Exactly
exist.
right. Although I have been told, and I don't know how it works in television, but I have been told that at BBC Radio, they don't have a dump button. And certainly they've had instances where people have sworn and said things, and they haven't been able to do anything about it. Because apparently the BBC is so grandiose that they feel like they don't need one.
Well, I find that astonishing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I know.
Astonishing. And I'm not entirely convinced by that.
I'm not
But
either.
Certainly with television, there was ample opportunity
Yeah.
for somebody just
No
to
question.
pull the
Well, it
plug
appears
on that.
it appears that Tim Davie intervened in some way, because he apparently told them not to make it available on demand. This particular, you know, what's his name, Bob Villan, who's now had his career pretty much sliced and diced by the American State Department and also his own management. So, you know, well done, mate. You may have made yourself famous for 5 minutes, but I'm afraid that'll be the end of your gravy train for a while. But so he apparently knew enough about how offensive it was to say we mustn't make it available on demand, but he didn't know enough about how offensive it was to actually just cut the whole broadcast, which he could have done.
Well, a couple of points emanating from that. Firstly, somebody revealed on social media yesterday that apparently Bob Villan had established 2 limited companies.
Yes, he has.
Through which he
I
was
saw
paid
those at the weekend.
in order to minimise his tax liability.
Both of which seem to have about 115 or 120 grand in.
As somebody said, how very left-wing of him.
Isn't it just socialists? They love them all, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And I'm
Also,
saying-
the other thing that people haven't seen, and I saw this again on social media yesterday, and I tweeted it out, before his ghastly chanting that he did, he also told a story about working for a record company and working for this fat, horrible, bald man who it turns out was a Zionist, as he calls him, and he saw his name later on a sheet of paper of people objecting to Kneecap playing at Glastonbury. So he turned his story about a former work experience that he had into another anti-Jewish rant.
And next, it raises not my most powerful point that I shall raise this morning, but I've long had concerns about Mr. Davie, a man of a particular age,
Yes.
who wears a suit, no tie, of course, because
No,
he's a progressive.
no tie.
So he can't wear a tie.
Right.
You know what I mean? That would be far too
No.
submissive of him.
Yes.
But he wears suits and white trainers.
Yes, a bit worrying that, isn't it?
Mate, buy some shoes.
Buy some shoes, yeah.
Act your age.
Yes.
But anyway, he might be looking for a new job before long.
He
because
might well be.
It is ghastly. Whatever the excuses that are put forward by whosoever was in that position of responsibility
Yeah.
at the weekend and did not pull the plug.
Exactly right, because considering there were so many people there, you would think, you know, it'd be one thing to say, look, it was an sort of utilised group of people. It was a weekend. Sometimes, you know, the wrong people are on and the wrong people are in charge. This is the big sort of, you know, crown, jewel in the crown of what the BBC do every single year. They spend an absolute fortune on it. You know, they own it and they broadcast it around the world. And so they are in many ways complicit in broadcasting this ghastly, horrible, heinous message from this bloke, you know?
Across their TV, their radio channels, the iPlayer, they splash it everywhere.
Yeah. Now, here's what's something interesting, because Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, who's been a bit quiet up to now in the first year of this government, she actually said this: when you have one editorial failure, it's something that must be gripped. When you have several, it becomes a problem of leadership. Now, who do you think that made me think of?
Yes, of course.
Not just Tim Davie, but Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of this great country, because he, as I'm afraid, is about to celebrate or commemorate at the very least, or commiserate 1 year in power. There's all sorts of pieces being written. I'm writing a couple as well, hoping to have a couple of pieces published this week. You know, there is nothing going right for this man. Let's have a look at Liz Kendall, because it turns out that despite rolling over and giving in to the rebels, they've not said that they're happy with it, and they've not said that they're going to vote for the welfare bill later on today. Here's what Liz Kendall had to say.
Our plans to ensure that people with severe, lifelong health conditions will never be reassessed, removing all the unnecessary and unacceptable anxiety this brings. And our plans to legislate for a right to try, guaranteeing that trying work in and of itself will never lead to a benefit reassessment, giving people the confidence to take the plunge and try work, something many organisations have called for years. But, Mr. Speaker, there have also been real concerns about our initial proposals. We have listened carefully, and we are making positive changes as a result.
We have listened carefully, we're making positive changes as a result, but I'm afraid that's not going to be good enough, and the Rebel MPs are going to humiliate the PM. By the way, not wishing to pick on Liz Kendall in particular, but why has she come dressed as a dentist?
I think her speech made matters worse.
Yeah,
yesterday.
I think so. I think so.
She irritated a lot of backbench MPs.
Well, this is the problem, you see. When Keir Starmer suddenly, I mean, even, what's her face? I'll come back to that in a minute. When Diane Abbott, when she came out yesterday and said, is Keir Starmer seriously expecting us to believe that the only reason that he thought the welfare bill was going well was because he was abroad? Yeah. Right? And that actually he didn't really understand what was going on because he was abroad.
Yeah,
seriously.
So you don't have dispatch boxes when you're sitting on an aeroplane for hours and hours and hours.
Right.
You don't have papers you can read through when you're at 36,000 feet.
Nobody's telling you from Downing Street, by the way, there's a bit of rebellion growing. But he should have known, because one of his chief whips quit. Do you remember? Yeah. Right in the middle of it.
Utterly ludicrous. Just symptomatic of the appalling lack of leadership that this country suffers from.
Exactly right. So it looks as though at the moment it's still on a knife edge, though. I mean, I'm not quite sure what the timing of this is. I presume it will be later on this afternoon or this evening, where the welfare bill, which, by the way, according to the Financial Times, for those of you who are worried about what it's going to do, it's still going to push 150,000 people into poverty. Despite the fact that they've diluted it, they won't be actually stopping the revolt, because dozens and dozens of rebels are holding out. The budget black hole will still be around about $4 billion, because they can't actually slice and dice it anymore. So all of this sort of activity that's happened over the weekend has led to nothing. And the problem for people like Starmer is when you've got an organisation that's so bad and doesn't work, when you go, right, now we're going to fix it, actually you can't fix it.
I had the entertaining pleasure of being on a train the other day with a deliciously indiscreet Labour MP.
Excellent.
Who got elected at the last election. So fairly new to Parliament and all of that. And of course we were talking about this potential rebellion and all that, and this MP said, yep, they couldn't vote for the bill as it stood and what have you, but he was hoping that an agreement would be reached by today. And he told me how he was really wrestling with his conscience because to vote against the party line is not something he was elected or wanted to do, but he felt he was going to have to. And in part, I see where he's coming from, because despite these new amendments that Starmer's put forward, one of them means that if you get injured and disabled next year, heaven forbid, you will be paid less than somebody who got injured and disabled last year. So how can somebody's disability of last year be more
Easy.
valuable than someone's disability of next year?
I can help you with this. It's called two-tier disability benefit.
There you go.
And he's now introduced it, because now we've got two-tier everything else, and Starmer was obviously worried we didn't have two-tier disability benefit, so now he's introduced it.
Lord Hermer will not be inviting you round for dinner at the weekend for using that two-tier expression.
What a shame.
You know how upset he gets about that, especially when you talk about two-tier judiciary, two-tier justice, two-tier policing.
Do you remember when Keir Starmer was asked it and he said, nonsense? He's really angry about it, you know. Apparently there's no such thing as two-tier anything unless it's two-tier Keir.
So I couldn't possibly encourage anybody to use the expression two-tier, but two-tier is really quite two-tier kind of entertaining.
It really is. And I mean, the trouble is, he walks right into it every single chance he gets. And Dan Hodges, right? I can't stop talking about Dan Hodges, because Dan Hodges started the year of Keir Starmer's kind of, reign on July the 4th, 2024, of sort of believing in him and thinking that, this will be a change from what we've seen, the Tories and the constant, psychodramas, the change of leadership, people trying to stab each other in the back. His headline today, I think, says it all. It's the most cack-handed, incompetent welfare bill in living memory. And he's one of their supporters. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he was turned some weeks ago, wasn't he? Even now, he cannot look himself in the mirror.
No,
Mr. Hodges,
he comes on with me, and he's more right-wing than I am now on this government, because they are so completely and utterly hopeless. Basically, virtually every penny of Liz Kendall's £5 billion saving has vanished. So how will the black hole be filled? This is on that speech she was saying was dreadful yesterday. Ms Kendall was asked how these collective U-turns would be funded, and she refused to answer. MPs would be told at the next fiscal event.
Well, doesn't that feed into another story that we might discuss this morning?
Indeed.
About the tax-free limit on ISAs.
Well, what a stupid idea this is.
Isn't it? Absolutely
this woman,
ludicrous.
Rachel Reeves, it was described to me, and I'm going to use this a lot, I think, the other day, that this government now is like the final stages of the Crystal Maze. And you're about to be kicked out. So you're just literally panicking and grabbing anything you can to go, oh, this'll do it, stall that, give this, that, And that's what she's doing. ISAs are a great way for people to save money. I wasn't until relatively recently wealthy enough to do it. But, I knew plenty of people did, and lots of people put money in ISAs for their kids and all the rest of it. £20,000 is a limit. She's talking about bringing it down to 5.
Anybody fortunate enough to have some spare cash that they want to save would act very responsibly in getting an ISA and utilising that tax-free limit on those savings.
Right.
What's a sensible all-round thing to do? Isn't it something that as a government you would want to encourage anybody that could have savings to invest in?
You would think so.
Oh,
because,
absolutely.
Why not encourage people not to do what the government's doing, which is to borrow and borrow and borrow to the point where you actually literally drive yourself into debtor's prison?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead, actually be responsible, make plans for your future, make it so that if something bad does happen to you, you lose your job or something immediately cuts short your money supply, you've got a little bit of stuff hanging around for a rainy day.
Exactly. And a tax-free limit, £20,000 a year.
Yeah.
And Rachel Reeves is looking to cut that apparently to maybe 4,000 or 5,000. Yeah. And what's that going to claw back?
Exactly.
What money is she going to get? It's not going to bring in billions upon billions upon billions, is it? But again, you see, politics of envy. Right. Somebody's got also, a few quid they can save.
They haven't been able, despite the so-called, massive majority they've got, they haven't been able to push through their own policies with their own backbenchers. So now they're coming after everybody else.
Yeah.
Because the welfare bill is 100 billion quid, right?
Yeah.
This will save them, what, 1 or 2 maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. And yesterday there was some kind of think tank, I think it was called the Intergenerational Foundation.
Yeah, sounds great.
That put forward some kind of suggestion that the old age pension should now be means tested.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that those perhaps better off.
There is a cohort of people in this country who think that pensioners are all well off and they shouldn't be able to get tax-free benefits at all because, the young people are suffering. I mean, I think that's absolutely, quite frankly, insulting to the people who built this country.
Well, I qualify for my old age pension in December of this year. I'll be 66 in December.
Okay.
And
you're lucky then. Normally you don't get it to about 68 now, do you?
Yeah, well, I've qualified for it at 66, and I've paid in since I was 16 years old.
Right.
So there will be 50 years of national insurance payments every year without fail.
Right.
I think I'm entitled to an old age pension.
Sure you are.
Even if I continue to work if I'm fortunate enough that the phone keeps ringing.
Of course you are.
I'm entitled for it. I've paid in.
Why should they nick all that money and say you don't need it because you're well enough off, because you've actually been a success in your life and you've actually managed to raise a family, buy a property, have a couple of nice holidays? You know, why should you be punished for having done that? This is the trouble. They're raising a generation of people on welfare who don't work and punishing the people who did work in order to pay for it. Huh?
You've nailed it, Mike. You've nailed it. That's absolutely isn't it? Surely.
Yeah.
Because I and my wife have worked tirelessly, continually throughout our adult lives.
Yeah.
Well, you could say we weren't even adults at 16 when we started work.
Right.
Since we were teenagers.
Yeah.
And we worked and paid tax and national insurance and worked, dare I say it, blooming hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no. They've done well. They've been sensible. They've been frugal to an extent.
Yeah.
They've not wasted their money. They've saved for a rainy day and to help their kids. Punish them.
Yeah. Take more money off them. Absolutely shocking. 21 minutes past 6. We're running slightly late. Carlin Knutsford says, is it possible the BBC producer responsible for not pulling the Bob Villain streaming decided to let the idiot spew his bile in order to bang him to rights? Nah, they're not that bright. No. Great show, Mike. I don't think they are. Although it has shown, as somebody pointed out yesterday, that this country has not yet completely sold up and given away the land to the maniacal left, because actually the backlash against this bozo and kneecap and all the rest of it has actually been pretty good. And I'm quite pleased to see it, and I'm pleased to see the government doing it as well. Surely if the BBC is paid by the public, says Robert Hitchin, it is the public that should have say in who runs it. We apparently vote for the government, but not Tim Davie. Well, it starts to get a bit difficult. We start electing the head of the BBC. I'm not sure I want to go down that road, but we'll come back to that. This is, of course, what we do here at Morning Glory. We bring you all the news that's fit to talk about and some of it that isn't. Coming up next, we'll talk about more chanting of death to the IDF down at Woolwich Crown Court yesterday. We'll find out what that was all about. Coming next.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:24. I'm Mike Graham. Peter Blexley is here with us. We were talking this morning about cheese actually being the stuff of nightmares. Apparently there's a scientific study, which we'll tell you about in a minute. It means that cheese actually does give you nightmares. I got one from Steve in Cornwall. He says, "Morning, Mike. I had a cheese sandwich before bed last night and had a nightmare that Keir Starmer won an election. It was scary. He was going to punish OAPs, farmers, the disabled, while secretly smuggling tens of thousands of illegal fit criminals from across the channel. Anyway, I'm off to the shower to get back to reality." Very good, Steve. I see what you did there.
Steve has stolen my gag. He's stolen my gag because I was going to say I'm going to eat cheese on toast before I go to bed every night,
right,
so that I have nightmares that distract me from Starmer.
Yes, absolutely.
But Steve's done a much better job than me.
Absolutely fantastic. Now let's have a look at a bit of death to the IDF, because that was the chant, of course, that went up at Glastonbury from this idiot who's now known. His real name is Pascal something, isn't he? He's double-barreled Pascal something or other. This was outside Woolwich Crown Court yesterday. You tweeted about this because the obviously what's now going to happen with all these lefty maniacs is that, you know, from the river to the sea is no longer going to be the chant. That's not anti-Semitic enough. So now they want to chant death to the IDF. These activists were supporting 18 people who are accused of storming an Israeli defence firm's UK base with a repurposed prison van. And they were alleged to have been trying to cause £1 million of criminal damage. Obviously, it's an ongoing case, so we can't talk about the actual case. But have a look at this. Now, you asked quite a pertinent question on Twitter yesterday, which was to the police.
Yes.
Are you likely to do anything about this?
To the Met Police, because yesterday afternoon, Avon and Somerset announced that they were launching a criminal investigation into what Bob Villan had said at Glastonbury.
Right.
So by the very same token, when I'd seen that video and I reposted it and put a question to the Met, are you considering a criminal investigation? Entirely reasonable question.
Yeah.
Also, those eagle-eyed people that may have watched that clip on YouTube, you will see clearly there is a Metropolitan Police officer there.
Yes.
So this is something the Met already knew all about.
Right.
So I've asked that question. A number of people, of course, reposted it and put comments on there, and it reached quite a wide audience. I'm yet to hear from the Metropolitan Police.
Right. And what's the point for the Metropolitan Police to put officers there? Because presumably they're putting them there in case there's any kind of problem or any kind of trouble. Are they recording what's going on? Are they likely to go back to them later and say, we're going to charge you, and you, because we've got video evidence of you? I mean, it's hard to know what the police's game here is.
Well, they should have had body-worn video on, and it should have been recording.
Right.
It's exactly what it was designed for.
Right.
If they haven't, that would be a major oversight, and one would have to ask, why not?
Well, this is it. And why would you bother putting police at an event like that if you're not going to be careful to arrest people who are breaking the law?
The Metropolitan Police hold a huge degree of responsibility for what happened at Glastonbury with Bob Villan.
Yes.
Those senior officers that are in charge, because for months upon months now, they have appeased the pro-Palestine mob as they've marched on the streets of London with their chant. And that from the river to the sea means from the River Jordan into the Med, you expunge that part of the world of Jews.
Yes.
It's a utterly genocidal, anti-Semitic chant.
Yeah.
And the Met Police in the past have cowardly said that it could be construed as something else.
Right.
Just like they've cowardly said in the past, calling for jihad.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Could
That's
be something other than...
It could be you just want a cheese sandwich.
The war.
You know, cheese-had.
Moral striving against some kind of nonsense that they call it, right?
Yeah.
This
and that
appeasement
might look like an ISIS flag, but it's not actually an ISIS flag.
Yeah. And this appeasement, of which the Metropolitan Police have been so guilty, their senior officers, in not telling their front line to act and arrest and drag those people out of those crowds. That appeasement has empowered people so that you then get that vile Bob Villan standing up at Glastonbury, empowered to chant what he did, thinking that they can act with impunity.
Yeah, because it gives them the idea that actually they normalise it. So, you know, everybody gets involved in it and it's fine.
And can you imagine how Jewish people in the UK today must feel with this going on time and time and time
shocking.
again.
Absolutely shocking. It's disgraceful what's been allowed to happen because, as I say, and a lot of people who are doing that chanting, and I don't count some of these sort of, extremist protesters, but an awful lot of people at Glastonbury will have been doing it because it's trendy, because they think it's all right to do it, because they haven't been worried about actually being arrested for doing it, and that's part of the problem.
Because they're slacked-brained half-wits.
They are,
who want to be a part of something.
Yeah.
In between lentil munching, reading The Guardian, and naming their children after planets.
Yes.
They want to be part of something. They're pathetic.
I know, they really are. Another piece of news this morning, this from Jim. The Royal Train's been scrapped. Bangor's the only train in the UK that runs on time. Probably a good idea, otherwise our government will paint it in rainbow colours and use it to distribute illegal immigrants all over the country. Probably right, big spread in the sun. Royal Train stopping, and it shows a lot of pictures of the Queen. Used to love the Royal Train.
Yeah.
I can see why they don't need it anymore. But the thing about it running on time, I was supposed to meet my son last night. He was coming down from Manchester on his way to Sussex, and we were going to have a quick pint together. His train was 90 minutes late. Yeah. 90 minutes late, so by the time he got here it was too late for me to see him.
I love trains. I love travelling by train.
You do a lot of that,
It's my favourite form of transport, when they run on time, and when people aren't putting their feet on the seats, and they're not covering them in graffiti, and they're not dropping litter, and when they're not cancelled or delayed. I do love train travel. This train is going to go into a museum apparently, but I think there's a business opportunity here for somebody, because there are some astonishing railway journeys that can be done in the UK. Absolutely beautiful. You know, those parts of the country that haven't yet been ruined by mass migration, terminal decline.
Or Angela Rayner's concrete blocks plan. Or Ed Miliband, apparently he wants to put 347 square miles of solar panels over Britain.
Well, those parts of the country that have not or will not be ruined by such policies, of which we are fortunate to have quite a few, have train lines going through them, and the views, the sights are absolutely magnificent. I'm sure people fortunate enough to be able to pay the fare would go on journeys on the former Royal Train and might enjoy sleeping and eating and gazing
Make it
out
kind of
the window,
Orient Express type experience.
and all of that. Yeah, exactly. So
but you know what would happen, because they'd have to use the same train track as everybody else, and they'd probably get stuck behind some train that was from the Avanti West Coast Line, which is what my son was on yesterday, and just going absolutely nowhere. I was once stuck on a train coming back from somewhere, I can't remember where it was, and it was stuck, and they said, we have to wait here, and I said, well, how long for? And they said, well, we don't know. Why? Oh, well, there's a train further up that's broken down. And this was like a main-line train service. I said, well, don't you have any way of getting around the train that's broken down? No, we just have to wait until somebody comes and tows it away. And you're thinking, with all the train networks we've got in this country, and you see places like Crewe, and you see, the number of different railway tracks, how can you only have one track that goes north and south? What's that all about?
Somebody clearly didn't build a siding anywhere near it, did they?
Yeah, I mean, you think that wouldn't be tough. Anyway, listen, it's 6:32, coming up 6:33. Front page of The Sun is a great one this morning. It's the latest in their Deliveroo Just Eat. I was going to say Just Stop Eating. It's a different organisation altogether. That's the government now. And the other bozos, Uber Eats, apparently they've just nicked a load of them, so we'll come back to that. We'll tell you all about that. Coming next, right here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 6:35. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock. Peter Blexley's here with us as well, former Metropolitan Police detective. Check this out, by the way. There's a picture on the front of page 11 of the Daily Mail. That's Bournemouth Beach, right, which looks lovely. Lots of people in the water, lots of people on the sand. You know, very, very tightly, packed beach. Summer Monday, last Monday of June. Just struck me when I saw this, Peter, this morning. Some of these people are supposed to be at work. How many of these guys do you think are working from home?
Likewise, my wife and I had exactly the same conversation last night when we saw those scenes on the television.
Right.
Now, of course, some of the youngsters might have finished their A-levels, so they might be done with school.
True.
Some students might be home from uni.
True.
OK, so I accept that they all might be out there thoroughly enjoying themselves. But there's still a huge number of people on that beach, and I wonder how many people said they're working from home that day and decided to go down and slap a bit of the Factor 50 on or whatever.
Exactly right. And it's lovely. I mean, I'm not one of those that complains about the hot weather. I mean, I watched, I don't know if you did last night, and I always question why I do it, but I watched the BBC News at 6. They spent the first sort of 5 minutes, top story for 5 minutes, all about the heat and all about how hot it was, and then they wheeled out some bozo to talk about climate change and how the climate's changing. And now, instead of getting a heat wave every 1 in 50 years, we get one every 1 in 5 years. But then they don't define what they call a heat wave. And then they said, oh, we think a heat wave is when they have 3 hot days in a row. Yeah. Right, that's a heat wave now.
So they say.
Yeah, I quite like the hot weather, I must admit. And I know there will be people, I had some critics yesterday who said some of us are housebound and some of us are, suffering from various different ills, and so it's not always nice for us, and I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to belittle you in any way, shape or form. But for most people, sunny, hot weather is a good thing. Yeah,
my darling mum found it a bit of a struggle yesterday. I went and did her shopping for her and went over to see her. I'd got her a new fan and a handheld fan the other day, and she still finds it a bit warm. She's 96, and when you're older, you can't regulate your body temperature like you can when you're young. Right. So yeah, she finds it a bit of a struggle, but she was all right. But yeah, this whole beach scene,
but the
lovely
sort of catastrophisation of the weather, though, is not necessary, is it?
Yes. No, it really isn't. But here's another. See, one morning, 2 business opportunities. Yeah. Shall we start an air conditioning company?
Why not?
Because I think more and more people are going to go for aircon in their houses, aren't they?
Absolutely. Well, I promise myself every year, I must get myself one of those air conditioning machines. I was in Cyprus a couple of years ago, and I was in a shop, and they had this fantastic sort of straight, freestanding thing that you could just put in the middle of the floor. Yeah. And it doesn't need a massive exhaust or anything like that, and it just really cools the place down. But every year I forget to do it until it's too late, and then they're all sold out.
I wonder if there's a grant from Ed Miliband for you and I starting up this air conditioning company.
There's an idea.
I wonder if they'll give us a few bob, and I wonder if the solar panels will provide enough electricity to fuel them.
You would hope that would be the case. I was talking to my guy as I was driving in this morning, who said he had a nightmare yesterday because he had to put the air conditioning on quite a lot, and of course he's got an electric car. And electric cars, once you put the air conditioning on, only go about 10 feet. So, it wasn't able to do very much work as a result. Had to keep plugging it in. Yeah. Anyway, there we are. Let's talk about this. Did somebody say just nicked? Which is a great headline on the front page of the Sun. Cops raid on migrant riders after the Sun expose. This, of course, is from last week. Thomas Godfrey, who was the Sun reporter that we spoke to last week, posed as an Afghani immigrant and managed to get himself a licence to drive around in an electric bike. Delivering food to people within hours, supposedly, of them coming into this country. So yesterday, immigration cops began cracking down on them. Let's have a look at Thomas Godfrey posing as a migrant.
Because I am not the person who owns this Just Eat account. In fact, as far as the person who owns the account thinks I am a channel migrant. They will be expecting someone called Daniel. I'm not. I'm Thomas. And I'm going to ask them how they feel about that.
Hi,
I've got a drop off here for Rebecca.
Yes, perfect, thank you.
What did you order? What did you go for?
Wimpy.
Ah, superb.
Yeah.
People are coming over illegally from France and then working as Just Eat Deliveroo drivers. And then they can go around London, Surrey, wherever, just dropping off people's orders despite having no right to work.
No,
I mean, how do you feel about that?
No, that makes me a bit nervous now.
Yeah.
Bit nervous now? Well, probably so. They say immigration cops. You'll know this better than me. Are they immigration cops? Or are they Home
Border
Office?
Force. It's Border Force,
right.
basically.
So it's not the police?
No,
Right.
it certainly isn't.
No.
And, you know, huge shout out to Tom Godfrey and the rest of the team. Come on, Rachel Dale, Tom Seaward, Jack Elson, you know, doing a great job. And they've really stuck with his story since they kind of broke it on June the 24th.
Yeah.
Then again on June the 25th. That clip from Tom, June the 30th, and today. Take my hat off to them. But, OK, so it's good that Border Force officers go to this migrant hotel in the Barbican in central London and start questioning these riders.
Yeah.
OK, that's good. But let me tell you, there's a column on page 4 from Baz Javid. Remember him?
I do remember him.
Used to be in the Met, right?
Yeah.
Senior officer. And he's now Director of Immigration Enforcement. And he writes this short column, and as far as I'm concerned, it's utter hogwash.
Yes.
Because this is just a headline-grabbing bit of good news.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be rolled out every day
No.
across hundreds and hundreds of migrant hotels.
And there's
We're not
tens
going to
of
see
thousands
thousands of people
Right.
arrested.
And they're not going to deport them either, are they?
No.
What are they going to do with them?
And his last line in this piece, Baz Javid, right, says, "There is no hiding place from our enforcement teams and you will feel the full force of the law." Yeah, righto.
Really? Right, you think?
Yeah, OK, well, let's see the busloads of them being nicked then, shall we?
I know.
Let's see thousands of bikes being
one of the
seized.
things that the Sun did was on day 2, I think, of the first expose, they went around to a few hotels just in London where you could quite clearly see dozens and dozens of these bikes parked up outside, you know, where people were working from there. It's not difficult. You know, it's like a sort of encaptured criminal scenario. You know where the criminals are. You know where they're operating from. You know what they're doing. You know, what's to stop you just going down there? And I said this last week, steamrolling over all the bikes, you know, just make a big thing of it, and lift all the blokes who are pretending to be working.
Yeah,
What's,
it really,
you know, it's not hard, is it?
As detective work, it really isn't the most challenging
not-
case
no.
you will ever be presented
You're not having
with.
to crack the case very hard.
No,
you know, it's all there.
Not a super sleuth.
Right. The other migrant story, and this one will really wind people up, is a picture, a great picture on the. It's on every paper, but the Sun have got it on page 5. A brazen migrant holding an expensive smartphone to film himself on a dinghy, right, leaving France for the UK. Now there's a load of them, and I think you can probably count. They call it a small boat, but it's reminiscent of those pictures you used to get from India when people are hanging off the train. You know, there's thousands of them. I mean, there's a good probably 60 or 70 people on this boat, and there's a guy at the front of it. He's got one of his mates with his arm around him, taking a selfie like that, you know, so that everybody can, you can see everybody in the background. So they're actually filming their trip across the channel now.
Well,
I mean, unbelievable.
As you may remember, the sun shone brightly on Sunday and the wind didn't blow.
No.
So we got another 585 illegal migrants who washed up in 8 or 9 boats. I think it was 8 boats.
Well, I hope that gets reflected on migrant tracker, which seems to have stalled. There's something wrong with it.
Can you believe it? Another 585. And the wind didn't blow very much yesterday either.
No.
So let's wait and see what those figures are.
Yeah.
And with each and every illegal migrant who comes into this country, our culture gets diluted just a little bit.
Yes.
And everything we treasure, the Britain we love, gets changed just a little bit. And I would argue not always for the better.
I don't think ever for the better, to be honest, in this particular scenario. Let's get a voice note from Andy.
I think it's brilliant that the police have finally started to crack down on these illegal delivery drivers. I just hope they come to Portsmouth and do it as well, because I actually do the job bona fide. You know, I'm a proper delivery driver with all the right insurance, etc. If they come here, they'd have a field day. The amount of people doing it in uninsured, untaxed cars, etc., and also people who shouldn't be doing it in general, they really would clean up. So that's what my wish is. Cheers, Mike. Keep up the good work, mate.
Just one quick note,
Andy, good
Mike.
one, thank you.
One quick note, Mike, if I may. I need to correct myself. This is immigration enforcement officers, not border forces. Closer examination.
So that's still Home Office, though, isn't it?
So, yeah,
it's just a different branch of the Home Office.
Yeah, exactly. Headed up by Baz Javid. Yeah, righto, Baz. Let's
Baz.
see if your words come true or not.
Baz, there's no hiding place, Javid, as he's now known.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always worried about things like that. Morning, Mike. It's OK the police arresting these delivery guys, but what will happen to them? Nothing. Close these companies down. End of, says David Aberdeen. Yeah, wasn't Angela Eagle supposed to be meeting up with these people, the companies themselves, this week? Remember last week when the story came out? She said, oh, yeah, we're going to crack down on this. We're going to meet with the companies next week. Which is what they're going to say. Peter in Suffolk takes us back to 1976. You'll remember it. Mike and Peter, 3 hot days in a row. In 76, we had 3 months in a row, but we didn't call it climate change then. Funnily enough, somebody put a picture out of a woman walking in Trafalgar Square Fountain back in 1976. I remember because I was at school, and my sister and my parents were away, I think. My sister and I bunked off at some point or other during the summer and lay on we had a flat roof in the top of my block of flats and got completely burnt to a crisp. Then went to see Tommy the movie that had only just come out, and it was so sunburnt I couldn't sit in the seat. I was like, you know, but that was great, you know. And here we are.
I had the great good fortune of leaving school in 1976.
Yes.
And so I spent that entire glorious summer fishing and playing cricket and hanging out with my mates.
Very nice.
It was wonderful.
Fantastic. And that's what used to be life in Britain, of course. 6:46. Peter Blexley's here. We've got much more to talk about, including what Ed Miliband wants to do. He wants to make an area the size of, I think, the West Midlands covered completely in solar panels. We're going to talk about the nanny state monitoring restaurant calories that you take in when you're there. And also, we might talk a bit about Wimbledon as well, because we did rather well. This is Talk.
Because you'd think that Ofcom of all people would know that the responsibility of broadcasters is to their audiences. It's not to the tender feelings of people who don't like what sex they are. And so even this idea of courtesy, I think, is a bit misdirected. It's been laid on us all, Julia, that we all have to be courteous to trans-identifying people. That's fair enough. I don't want to be rude particularly, but I also have a responsibility to speak clearly in order to protect everyone else's rights. Yes. And if someone doesn't like that, then I may have to hurt their feelings.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 10 minutes to 7. The time is flying. It's the first day of July, ladies and gentlemen. It's very, very exciting because I always like it when you get moving into a new month, you know, giving a clean slate. I mean, still bad news for Keir Starmer, I'm afraid. Nothing to change for him. Let's get a voice note from Alex on Rachel Reeves.
Morning, Mike. Excellent show. This is Alex from Cardiff, who's now on holiday in Crete. Make my blood boil. Rachel Reeves, mean test this, take away money from that, hide your savings, just get out while you can. Let the country sink, and that's why I'm going to go for dual nationality and try and live in Greece. It's game over for the UK. As for Peter Bexley, mate, take your money, take it while you can and run away.
To Crete.
To Crete, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, ordinary people who wouldn't otherwise think about leaving the country are actually seriously considering it. The number of people I speak to, it's quite remarkable. There's one from Dan here who says, do you realise there are 2 helicopters above your studio? The answer to that is yes, because there's something going on which has to do with the new Superman movie. I believe that there's some kind of inflatable Superman flying around the Shard. I don't know if you spotted it when you were outside.
Well, of course, as I arrived at 5 o'clock this morning, whenever I see a helicopter above, I kind of go
assume
into
it's
like,
a police helicopter.
Right, so what have I got to do here?
Yeah.
Have I got to take cover? Is there somebody I need to pursue that I can help detain?
Yeah.
You know, those old instincts just immediately kick in.
Sure.
And then, fortunately, it's a publicity thing for the new Superman film.
Movie. So, thank you, Dan, for letting us know. Question for Peter here, from Peter in Norwich. If a crime is pointed out to a police officer to be in progress, can that officer decide what laws he or she will enforce or ignore?
He should know what laws to enforce. He should have been sufficiently trained. He should have learnt about it. He should have done practical examples of it in his police training. Sadly, police recruitment, vetting and training is not what it used to be, and we're all paying the price for that. But yes, Peter, he should absolutely know the law.
Yeah, he absolutely should. And he shouldn't have discretion as to which one of those laws he then decides to implement, right?
No, I like police officers having discretion.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important part of policing. But of course, that discretion kind of grows with experience when you're being shown, because sometimes there might be 2 situations that are very similar. One where you might say to somebody, go home, mate, behave yourself, or you'll get nicked.
Right.
And another situation, quite similar, where you might actually go, enough's enough, you are nicked.
Right.
You know, so sometimes police discretion on the ground, I think, can be a good thing, particularly in local communities and building trust and applying common sense.
Yes.
Something that this station is laden with.
One of those great phrases that really sorts everything out if you want to use it properly. How about this? Page 10 of the Daily Mail. Miliband wants solar panels to cover an area the size of the West Midlands, and this is why we get figures from this maniac, right? This is by 2030. Apparently, at the moment, houses powered by solar in 2025 are 2 million. I don't know if that's current or whether it's what they want it to be. By 2030, they want it to be 9 million, which is, you know, about more than 4 times as many. Percentage of land covered by solar panels at the moment in 2025 are 0.1%. By 2030, 0.4%, which would be equivalent to the size of the West Midlands.
Moribund Miliband, as I call him, right? All his words just fall on deaf ears, because we are not getting cheaper energy.
No.
All that stuff we've been promised, right? None
we
of
get
it's
told
happening.
today on the news, oh, don't worry, your energy bills are going down by 150 quid. Well, it's a drop in the ocean for most people.
Yeah, and well, when?
Yeah.
Like, show me, right, where's my bill? I just opened my bill.
Yeah.
I don't see it. And so these kind of initiatives and this lunatic drive towards these net zero targets, which are coming at huge cost, considerable inconvenience, and the public are not buying into, are just hot air, funnily enough. No one's listening.
No one is. And also, funnily enough, a story which is not completely unrelated to that, and more bad news for Keir Starmer as he comes up to his first birthday. Nissan plans to cut hundreds of jobs at its Sunderland factory because they're scrambling to boost profits amid slow demand for, guess what, electric vehicles. People don't want electric vehicles because they know that they're not as reliable as petrol vehicles. They know that they don't go as far as petrol vehicles. And despite the fact that an awful lot of them are being driven around in London, you'll see it. If you're going long distances, it's no use to you, especially in this weather.
And of course, as you brilliantly pointed out this morning, stick the aircon in one.
It just all dies. I know. It's absolutely shocking. What about this? Keir Starmer once again gets it wrong. They wanted to bring in a ban on alcohol advertising in this country.
Oh,
right?
yes.
And it now turns out that the Americans have said, hang on a minute, if you start banning alcohol advertising, that means all of our big drinks giants that sell things like Jack Daniels and various other American alcoholic drinks, tequila, I suppose, would be in there as well. They're saying that would constitute a non-tariff barrier to trade, and an official intervention is now expected from Washington. Thank God for Donald Trump, is all I say.
Especially if an American brand wants to launch a new product.
Yeah.
And, of course, they will splash it with a load of advertising.
Yeah, right.
Worldwide, because they want that take-up.
Yeah.
And if a new alcoholic drink of some description, whatever that may be, is then denied advertising space on the airwaves in the UK in whatever form of advertising,
because of some nanny state nonsense.
Yeah, so they're going to say this is a barrier. Yet again, have you really thought it through,
Absolutely
Mr. Prime
not.
Minister?
No.
Or is it like your welfare bill where you weren't across that brief, or this where you clearly haven't thought it out, or just about anything you care to mention where you haven't really thought it out?
No, I mean, that would appear to be the problem with Keir Starmer. There's a great piece in the Mail, actually, written by Niall Gardner, who is one of Mrs Thatcher's former advisors. I'm just going to try and find it, because the headline itself is just fantastic, where he basically says that it's absolutely and utterly ludicrous, the situation we now find ourselves in, with a politician who should never have been made. Yeah, here we are. Starmer has Starmer has no energy, vision or strategy for Britain on the world stage. He offers only weakness, decline and a disregard for the sovereignty of this nation. And he really does. I mean, that is it. 12 months of chaos, as we're going to be telling you. In fact, we should play that little thing, should we? Have we got time? This is what we're putting out on Friday. It's a little special that we put together, looking back at the 12 months of chaos of this government. Check it out.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Happy anniversary, Sir Keir.
Well done, mate. Here's another one for you. Restaurants will be forced to tell the government what their customers eat under nanny state plans drawn up by Labour to tackle obesity.
If I've had a good week and I've earned a couple of quid, one of the real joys in life is on a Friday night going out with my wife or maybe some friends for a well-earned dinner. Yeah. No washing up, no cooking to do. Let's have a great time and maybe a bottle of 3 of wine.
And maybe stimulate the economy a little bit while you're at it.
Exactly.
You know.
What I really don't need is some nanny state government splashing all over the menu how many calories I'm going to eat.
They've already supposedly got rid of that, haven't they? I mean, you're not supposed to have that anymore. It was the Tories that introduced it, to be fair, and then they said they were going to take it off. But this is now worse than just telling you this is how much your hamburger is going to put weight on you. This is actually them having to give that data to some government organisation.
Imagine
so they know what you're eating.
Waiter. Imagine, boy, would you like soup of the day at 395 calories, Mr. Blexley?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just have to get on the phone to the Department of Health to let them know you're eating it.
Yes.
Just in case you have a heart attack. Speaking of which, finally, because we're nearly out of time, apparently British doctors will be given priority for NHS jobs under new plans. I mean, what's going on? Why have they not already got priority?
Doesn't it just make you shake your head?
It really does.
Why haven't we prioritised English, British doctors and nurses forever?
I know. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Let's bring in a load of doctors that don't speak such English that they can actually tell us what to do. Anyway, Peter Blexley, an absolute pleasure to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
For all your help. We'll be bringing you more of the madness of this government and everything else that's going on throughout the course of the next 3 hours. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Don't forget, send us a voice note, 0344 499 1000. We're coming up to almost 1 year of this government. I don't know how we've managed it, but here we are. But it's not a very happy birthday, is it? This is Talk. We'll see you after the news.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
8722, starting message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why? The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months, we have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Although I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, do you get the job, yeah? Go on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what... There's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when it's time for Julie Hartley-Brewer. We've got loads going on today, an awful lot of big stories this morning to talk about, including the fallout continuing from Glastonbury, in which it turns out that Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC, was not only aware of what was going out on the airwaves, he actually was at the event itself. He was down at Glastonbury, supposedly visiting all the staff. I presume he sees more of them down there than he does in broadcasting houses. There was 500 of them sent down to take over the entire weekend. And, of course, what we talked about an awful lot yesterday was the shocking situation when Kneecap were booked to play in front of all of those Palestinian flags that you can see there. And also Bob Villan, who now is definitely the villain of the piece. He also is now responsible for bringing shame not only on the entire festival, but actually on this entire country by chanting death to the IDF, which of course is now a renowned chant used by all pro-Palestinian marchers and pro-Palestinian activists. It's gone away from the river to the sea, not good enough anymore. It's not anti-Semitic enough, so now they want to chant death to the IDF. On the front pages this morning, Tim Davie getting an awful lot of shellacking. BBC boss at festival for rappers hate chant, it says. Davie made a decision on the anti-Israel broadcast that left the footage online all day, and people are now asking why he's still in the job. On the front page of the Daily Express, an Israeli minister is saying that Tim Davie needs to put the BBC's house in order or he should resign. And of course, the end result is that Glastonbury still doesn't really have a policy on what to do about what they might regard as, controversial acts. 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, of course, the BBC still don't really have any answers. And it now turns out that the government still don't have any answers either. Lisa Nandy made a phone call to Tim Davie while he was actually there. Nobody knows exactly how that went, but we'll be bringing you the latest on that as it goes. Meanwhile, the other big story today, the welfare bill is finally voted upon, and it looks as though Keir Starmer's attempts to quell the rebellion have not gone well. Starmer's benefit deal with rebels unravels, is what it says on the front page of the Telegraph. Front page of the Times, Labour rebels accuse Starmer of breaking welfare promises, and the Daily Mail, rebel MPs are set to humiliate the Prime Minister today. So it means despite all of the things that he's given them, all of the concessions that they've made, it hasn't made a jot of difference. They might actually pass the bill, but if they pass it, it will be with several dozen defections, several dozen rebels, and it may well be that the bill actually falls altogether. I said last week they might still pull the bill, and they may still do it. James Heal's going to be here. We'll talk to him very shortly. He's, of course, the Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator. We'll also talk about a red-hot Britain. We'll talk about doctors and nurses as well. Loads more going on. Plus, cheese apparently gives you nightmares. This is Talk. Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Now, not only is this the 1st of July, but it is obviously getting very, very close to the first anniversary of Keir Starmer's first year in power. Will he make it to 2 years? I'm not so sure. But let's take a little look back at some of the things over the course of this show that he said. Because, one, notice how much younger he looks, and two, notice how robotic he still is. This is fixing the foundations.
Fixing the foundations is like finding damp in your wall. You can paint over it and get the hairdryer out and dry it. All done that. Hope it goes away. Or you can strip it out, rip out the plaster and deal with the problem once and for all.
Yeah. A couple of things there, really, James. Very good morning to you. The foundations aren't in the wall, one. And if you use a hairdryer on them, it's probably not going to be a great idea for the future standing of the building.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably sums up Keir Starmer's first year in office, right? I mean, quite a sort of confused approach to fixing the foundations, constant chop and change, and actually no idea particularly what he seems to be doing or want to do in office. No. It's Niall Gardner's piece in the Mail today where he talks about a man with sort of no leadership skills, no courage, no ambition, no passion. I mean, it is like being run by a very, very mediocre bank manager somewhere in the sort of the home counties, you know, who gets up every day and goes to work and doesn't really do much of anything all day. I mean, that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And it's all coming home to roost just in time for his first anniversary. Well, yeah, I mean, I think some people will be crying out for Arthur Mannering to run the country rather than Keir Starmer. I think, you know, it basically, they came in. I remember I was talking to a senior Conservative yesterday, and they just said that they tried to fix the car while it was moving. Yeah. And so what I mean by that, of course, is, you know, they started up on the word government and then have tried to innovate and try and decide what they want to do in office. And of course, that's incredibly hard because by that point, all the machinery's moving. You've already actually sort of left people who've got different aspirations of what they want to do in office. And that lack of a plan, that lack of any kind of sense of huge mission other than sort of vague goals to improve living standards, etc., I think is really coming back to bite this government.
Well, it has really, because they've been, I think the thing that surprised so many people is the incompetence, the level of inability that they've got to do anything, really. And even Diane Abbott yesterday tweeting about Keir Starmer and his interviews at the weekend, saying that, you know, well, of course, I was distracted. You know, when I made that speech about the land of strangers, I didn't really read it because somebody just firebombed my house. And you go, right. And then he says that he didn't really realise that the rebellion was going to be so big on the welfare bill because, in her words, she said, are we really expected to believe that he didn't realise that what he was doing was wrong because he was abroad?
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it was at that press conference last Wednesday and, you know, he came out and he said this stuff about noises off. And I thought, my God, you know, 126 rebels at that point and you're calling that noises off. That's your entire majority gone. Right. And now he comes out in The Observer on the Friday and then says, oh, I was distracted. I was in foreign affairs. Well, I'm sorry, Prime Minister, but the nature of the job means you have to be able to juggle both. And if you're not fully briefed and across the details, or you're not emotionally ready to give a press conference, you need to cancel that and then actually plan it in your own time. And I think... The thing that's so striking is that no one's around him seems to be there seems to be no leadership currently going on, which is a great frustration. And actually, by renouncing that Island of Strangers speech, what is jarring is that he said in that speech, "Oh, well, this is not a pre-prepared script. This is from the heart." And now, of course, it was purely from the script.
Yeah, but funnily enough, we watched it yesterday on the show, and he doesn't look as though he doesn't understand what he's saying. He doesn't look like a man who's just reading a script. He looks entirely like a man who is in great solid belief of what he's saying, which is part of his other problem, which is that people now say, well, why would we believe his excuse now that he hadn't read it before? When clearly it was a very, very craven attempt to sort of derail the reform vote in the local elections. He was hoping that if somebody thought he was tough on immigration, suddenly they might not vote for reform. Didn't work, of course, but, I'm not sure that he's not being entirely truthful here.
Yes, I think it was really striking to see how hard Ed Balls, who's a presenter of GMB now, but of course former politician, married to Yvette Cooper, how hard he went yesterday on Keir Starmer over that U-turn. And there were some reports that Yvette Cooper, his wife, and of course the Home Secretary, was very uncomfortable with some of those remarks. So this is the whole jarring thing, Mike, is that people who went out there and had to defend Keir Starmer's comments, I mean, whether you agree with them or not, defended them, and now he's renounced them. They're left looking like idiots. And of course, this is a growing problem for this government, where they U-turn on welfare, they U-turn on winter fuel, they U-turn on grooming gangs. That's the same problem Boris Johnson had towards the end, which is that who's going to go out and defend you?
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. I mean, we did that when they did the U-turn on the grooming gangs. We listed and we played clips of every single cabinet minister who was sent out back in January to say, we don't need to have a national inquiry because we've already had one, and everybody knows that there's no point in doing it. And, blah, blah, blah. And it was all very, well coordinated. And as you say, they all now look really stupid. Let's have a quick look. I think we've got a clip of the Stranger's speech. Check it out.
In a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers.
Some might say if you're a student of his delivery, then that's one of the more, I would say, forceful and even confident deliveries that he's done. Because he's normally kind of stunted with his speech, a little bit stilted, a little bit kind of, stop-start. He was quite flowing there, and he didn't appear to be reading. He wasn't looking down at his script. He might have had a teleprompter, but he wasn't, he didn't look like a man who was unsure of what he was saying. And I know enough about public speaking, as I'm sure you do, when you can kind of tell when people don't know what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's so, I think, jarring then, of course, Mike, is that because he seems so confident there, next time he gives a prominent sort of speech from the bully pulpit of Number 10, he summons all the journalists of this country and he says, pounds the table and says, this is what I really mean, everyone's going to say, are you going to renounce it like the Island of Strangers speech? And also, in that same piece, Mike, he talks about his very first speech in Downing Street, in the Garden, where he's talked about sort of things will get worse before they get better. And that was a mistake too. So you think that's 2 speeches, 3 policies renounced in a year. And this is supposed to be a big reforming Labour government with a massive majority first year in office. It's crazy.
And so many things are kind of conspiring against him right now. I mean, only last night, as I was sort of preparing to read a few bits and pieces for the show today, Nissan announces that they're going to slash hundreds of jobs up in Sunderland, not necessarily as a result of Keir Starmer's policies, but the state of the economy doesn't help. It's because there's a bit of a slowdown in sale of electric vehicles, for one thing, which is bad news for Ed Miliband, of course. But also, it's just that, once a politician starts to kind of lose the room, if you like, everything seems to collapse around him.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that Keir Starmer came in at a really difficult time for social democracy. Everyone likes to draw comparisons between this government and the Blair-Brown government. It's very different for many reasons. But of course, they were able to hold their electoral coalition together, partly by large state spending and particularly huge spending on the NHS from around 1999 onwards. So I think that that's going to be really difficult, trying to replicate that without the money there. And obviously a very difficult financial outlook and business outlook. And you've, of course, got Donald Trump making a series of decisions which make it much harder for Rachel Reeves in the economy. And for a Labour Party that I think has always favoured larger spending over sort of lower taxes, there's only going to be one incentive, which is bigger state spending, and unfortunately that potentially risks choking off the growth in the economy.
Yeah, I mean, that is the problem, isn't it? And then we wake up to more mad news about Rachel Reeves' plans. She apparently wants to slap a ban on the £20,000 tax allowance for cash ISAs and bring it down to £5,000. which seems to make absolutely no sense at all to anyone. I know there's a drive from the city to say we must try and get people's savings out of cash and into stocks and shares. But again, plenty of research to say that only 1 in 5 people will do that.
Yeah, I mean, spot on, Mike. I mean, this is something that I think the Treasury has always shared from the past 10 years across party lines, Labour and Conservative. They certainly want to get that money into the city to make more use of it. The constant frustration you hear from Treasury officials is that, we're sitting on a gold mine or some such words like that, saying that we need to get this money out there. But of course, if you're therefore disincentivizing savers, you do wonder about when people will stop, frankly, deciding to do extra hours for work, because the financial cliff edges are such. You've got that, you've got the point of view and 100,000 in the country, there's a huge financial penalty for that. This stuff is important. And so it's not just about higher taxes, lower taxes, it's just about tax reform as well. And actually, as you say, getting the right rates of ISIS as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm listening every day to people, and I've got, it's a bit long, so I'll read it later, but so many people saying, we're literally getting out the country. Families, not people who have got like large businesses to run or people who can run their businesses online. People who genuinely have got a connection to another country in Europe or wherever it is, whether it's South Africa or Dubai or America, and everyone's just packing up and leaving. I mean, this is not just word of mouth kind of anecdotal stuff. This is, I think, really, really quite fundamental changes in the way that people are seeing their lives and the way that they want to get away from this government. Yeah, and certainly, and there's really interesting points made by, for instance, Dan Needle, who's a Labour supporting tax accountant. He makes the point that some of the most internationally mobile people are the global rich. Yeah. And so the people who are that highest sort of 5% or so, the ones that the left always wants to go after. You've got Richard Bergman proposing a wealth tax. What they don't understand is how mobile these people are. They can spend a few more days or a few less days in this country, depending on how attractive the tax incentive is. And it will be the middle class and the upper middle class who get squeezed as a result of it. People who are, GPs, etc., who may be earning a low 6 figures or sort of high up to sort of 80, 90,000 or so. Yeah. That is important. And as I say, the overall incentive is important. One of the reasons why you get the economy going is the animal spirits. And frankly, right now, it seems to be sort of putting it on life support. Exactly right. And I mean, talk about another story that's sort of biting him in the neck. Apparently, British doctors are now going to be given priority for NHS jobs under plans to make the health service self-sufficient in staff. This is the front page of the Times. You'd think this was just, 2 years after the NHS had been started up. So here we are in sort of 1950 with this idea. And it turns out that 2/3 of new doctors recruited to this country come from abroad, which is ludicrous. And everybody knows why that is. The BMA for years have said they want to keep a limit and a cap on the number of English and British doctors who qualify to be doctors in order to somehow keep the prices up, if you like. But Keir Starmer's going to set out a plan designed to get the NHS back on track, they say. Well, it's not going to, is it? We know that. Well, the danger is, of course, Mike, is that this government is much too operating when it comes to NHS in the interests of producers rather than consumers. So there's a line about sort of all the money that's gone into the NHS since July 2024. 2 out of every £3 has gone to the staff in the NHS rather than sort of improvements in technology. Now, of course, we want to see people within the NHS properly compensated for etc. But also, we need to make sure that we're getting the upgrades, because otherwise, if we just go straight into the trade unions, and of course, you've got the British Medical Association, we've got the leaders of that, the BMA trade union, saying that they're excited by the prospect of more strikes. I mean, the danger here is that a poor industrial policy and a poor industrial strategy with dealing with unions is therefore going to end up costing the health service and the taxpayer a lot of money. As you say there, the important thing is that you get these moves where the BMA is sort of counted on things like staff numbers, and that is a good sign that they're going to look at lifting the cap. But overall, the strategy I don't think is particularly positive when it comes to will these reforms benefit consumers in the short to medium term. No, absolutely right. James, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. James Hill, Deputy Political Editor. I see that old Jonathan Reynolds is out on the stump again, talking about welfare reforms. The Business Secretary, who doesn't know anything about business, probably doesn't know anything about welfare either. Also, certainly doesn't know anything about being a solicitor, which he pretended to be for about 10 years. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Just wanted to say that law enforcement need to take a firm hand with these immigrants now. We've seen people who are obviously new to the country walking into Greggs, walking into Tesco's, helping themselves what they want. Now, they're in these migrant hotels, they're getting everything paid for, they're working illegally, they're not paying tax. They're basically taking the wee-wee, aren't they? Doing exactly what they want, where the law-abiding majority, like me, are paying our tax, we're abiding to speed limits, we're paying for everything that we get, we're paying for train tickets, we're queuing up, we're being orderly and all that. But even people like me now, a law-abiding citizen who's never been in trouble with the law, I'm looking at all this and thinking, why am I wasting my time obeying laws, paying tax and doing everything correctly when law enforcement and the police don't seem to be cracking down on everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mark, a lot of people will be feeling the same way this morning because they look at the way things are going. The front page of The Sun this morning, I was just about to talk to Thomas Godfrey, nicking a load of illegal migrants who are operating illegally, working when they shouldn't be, not paying tax when they should be, and basically just taking the mickey, as you say. Morning, Mike, says Mark in Selby. Labour MPs are welcome to the club of people that Keir has flat out lied to. He has barefaced lied to the nation with whoppers like not a penny more on council tax, and who can forget the threat of energy costs coming down. I'm forensic and that the security of the nation is safe in my hands. Perhaps Labour MPs now know how the electorate feels. Well, I think that's right. A strange one from Andrew. He says, morning, Mike. What's with the now daily Sir Keir Starmer? What happened to that beloved and accurate refrain, two-tier Keir or Keith Starlin? Did Ofcom get to you? Some of us are getting worried that you've been nobbled. Really? You obviously haven't been listening. You must listen more carefully. Absolutely. I don't think there's any chance of me being nobbled at this point. It's 20 minutes past 7.
I would draw your attention to one obvious sort of vague contradiction in that. If you are agitating that Lucy Connolly should not be in jail, and I think we can all agree she shouldn't be in jail, some of us have different reasons for that, but if we agree she shouldn't be in jail, then I suppose you'd have to advocate that these guys also shouldn't be in jail. There is a police investigation. We will see what happens, but don't hold your breath. Where is the line between free speech and hate speech? Because there is a school of thought that says, you say whatever you like, mate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Never mind fixing the foundations. The Prime Minister says Norm is like damp in my walls. Smells, causes mould, and is hard to get rid of. Well, it shouldn't be that hard to get rid of, actually. You might be surprised at that. Also, this from Anthony de Selby, currently on the Somme in France, honouring the thousands who gave their lives 109 years ago this morning at the start of the battle. What would those men have made of our current crop of pathetic politicians? I feel like apologising to them all for the sacrifice they made. Keep up the good work. Yeah, Anthony, thank you very much indeed. Nice to remind us as well of 109 years ago this morning at the Battle of the Somme. Let's get a voice note from Michael.
What I don't understand is with all these illegal immigrants working, why the government doesn't fine these delivery companies £50,000 for every illegal immigrant they catch working for them. Rachel Reeves's black hole would be filled in a matter of months.
Well, you would think so. That would make perfect sense, wouldn't it? We're about to talk exactly about that to Thomas Godfrey, who's a reporter at The Sun, because the front page is the latest in the instalment of the illegals coming here and working when they shouldn't because of the broken borders. Brilliant front page this morning. Thomas, very good morning to you. This is the latest instalment in the saga of young men coming to this country and within hours getting jobs, driving around on electric bikes, terrorising the neighbourhood, delivering food. You posed as an illegal migrant yourself to get the licence to do it. Tell us a bit about this great headline. Did somebody say, just nicked?
Yeah, morning, Mike. Well, it seems after a week of banging the drum about this, the Home Office now have taken some action and proven really how simple it would have been to stop this happening in the first place. Yesterday, there were rolling raids throughout the afternoon at a migrant hotel in Barbican in central London. It was one of the hotels we had originally highlighted in our investigation, and it was where dozens of e-bikes with delivery bags from all three of these companies were brazenly on show outside. And if you'll remember, the people who own that hotel, the contractors, even built these delivery drivers working illegally their own little enclosure.
Yes.
This raid yesterday, around 10 people were arrested by immigration enforcement. Also some arrests on suspicion of migrants breaching their bail conditions for other offences they'd earlier allegedly committed. We watched on as some of those officials just basically went through migrants' phones to see what apps they were working. At one point, several phones were put into an evidence bag and taken away by the police. But, you know, this comes really after our probe and also after I made deliveries as an illegal migrant. One of your voice notes there really sort of shone the spotlight on the companies. And it is these companies that have failed at every single level to do anything. And if it gets to the point where someone like me can rent a Just Eat account while posing as a new arrival into the country and actually start delivering food to families when I could have been anyone. No one asked for my documents. No one asked me to take a picture of myself to verify. No one asked me for my address. I mean, that's where we really have a problem. And you have to think, how long have people in this country been at risk because of this scam?
Well, exactly right. And we've already played out that the video of you going to somebody's house and actually asking them, how do you feel about the fact that I'm not who I'm supposed to be? And she said that she was quite sort of nervous about it. And I think most people's reaction now is that. And a lot of people have sort of shrunk, I think, away from ordering this stuff now because they don't know who's bringing it to them. They don't know where it's been on the way. But I thought last week, did Angela Eagle, the Home Office Minister, not say she was meeting with the companies this week? Do we know whether that's actually happened?
Yes, Mike, that meeting happened yesterday. The companies sort of recommitted, as they do every time they are hauled in by the Home Office, recommitted to bolstering all of their sort of verification techniques. We think now Deliveroo will up the rate at which it asks drivers to take a picture of themselves. Same with Just Eat. Uber Eats had a policy where I think every 3 orders you had to verify yourself, but that policy will remain in effect. So it seems there is some movement after all these companies were dragged over the coals. But really, the responsibility lies with them now to actually do something. I have asked all the companies if they were going to send their own teams to some of these migrant hotels we identified. I mean, they're not exactly difficult to find from the raft of videos and pictures now online. And I didn't get a response from any of them as to whether their own investigators, their own staff, would be going in to confront it. They seem happy to leave it to the Home Office, who seem happy to leave it this long to do anything.
Yeah, exactly right. And of those who were arrested yesterday by the immigration police, what happens to them? I mean, will any of them be deported? Will any of them be detained? Will they be issued a caution? What's going to happen next?
Well, anyone in the migrant hotel has been here for less than 12 months, and it means their asylum applications in the overwhelming majority of cases are still going through. So they can't be removed until those applications are decided on one way or another. We could see some charges, although in the last 6 months only one person in the country has been prosecuted for illegally working for Deliveroo, and that person allegedly at least had been doing it for 6 years up to that point. So we could see some charges if they decide now to make an example of the migrants at this hotel. and actually bring them to court and actually lay down the law. But actually, the most likely action here is that we could see fines for the companies. It could be up to £60,000 per illegal worker they find. Whether the Home Office will actually levy any sort of penalty against these free courier companies, we simply don't know until the investigations by immigration enforcement are complete. Though if you're taking away phones and you're taking away bikes and you're taking migrants away in vans because Deliveroo have phoned them up in front of immigration enforcement, as happened yesterday, I think it's a fair judgment to say that at least some of the people in that hotel were working illegally.
Right. And also, as I said at the time when we spoke last week, where's the money going? Because there must be a way of tracking the money as to where it's being paid into, because a lot of these guys, having just arrived in Britain, won't have bank accounts. They may have some kind of, electronic bank account or some international app of some kind, but it'd be interesting to know where the money is paid into as well, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. I made about 20 quid doing my deliveries last week, and sadly I'm not going to see a penny of that because as soon as we told Just Eat the details of the account we had rented, they shut it down. So I'm 20 quid poorer, having put in 6 hours of work into that. But I think the serious point is that a lot of anyone who's renting an account, the money gets paid into the account of the person who owns the account. There was one extreme example we were told about where 50 different accounts were being paid into one bank account. So it is a proper industry on the black market. And so hopefully when the Home Office and Immigration Enforcement manage to get onto these accounts migrants have been using through taking their phones, etc., they can actually go after the people who have been running these sort of Just Eat rings on Facebook and on social media, because I think you're right in that it's rife for exploitation here. People could basically just never be paid the money they've earned, even if they've been working illegally. Right. There's criminality basically at just every level.
Right. Yeah, because it looks very much like a sort of a gangmaster setup, doesn't it, where people get hired to do jobs, but they never really see all the money. They might get paid a sort of stipend by whoever's running the actual racket, but the money's actually going into some big central bank, which is all being kept or used for other nefarious purposes, no doubt.
Correct, yeah, and also a lot of the people coming over who are working on these apps are potentially paying off the debts from their channel crossing. So all the money actually, and people make the point that, oh well, why don't we have some sort of carve out for asylum seekers to work? Why don't we regulate it and do it properly? But actually, a lot of their work and a lot of us ordering Deliveroo and Just Eat. There is a real possibility that money that they make is being funneled back into criminal gangs and criminal gang enterprises. And that is the exact opposite of what we should be funding. It's the worst trade and the most horrific trade in Europe. So I think if anyone knew that if they order a delivery to be dropped off at their home, and it's not me that turns up, but it is an illegal migrant, but there was a chance that money was being put into the back pockets of organised crime gangs, they would think twice. And I think the apps now have a reckoning ahead of them where they need to do something urgently to completely cut off the supply of illegal migrant workers. Or I think millions of people across the country, having read our investigation and having seen the reaction to it, will simply just delete the apps from their phone.
Yeah, you'd like to think so. Thomas, great stuff again. Great show this morning. Thomas Godfrey, reporter at The Sun there, with a massive expose of what's been going on the black market with regard to these Deliveroo bikes, the Just Eat bikes, the Uber Eat bikes. I mean, it would explain why there's been such a massive increase in the numbers of mopeds, the numbers of bikes, the numbers of people doing it. If it's all being fed into a sort of a black market, industrial level gang where people are just taking money out of this country, not paying any tax on it, and using it to fund even further criminal activity, that would make an awful lot of sense to me. That's why we're seeing what we're seeing, I think. Bit of breaking news for you. We just heard on the news a little while ago that energy prices were going to drop by £150. Well, it turns out actually they're going to rise. So I'm not sure where they got that from, because apparently network charges are going to rise as the price cap actually eases. So as much as the price cap might bring some prices down, this will bring them up, because so-called network charges currently make up 22% of a typical household bill, and they're going to go up from April next year by £24 a year as part of efforts to maintain energy security amid the transition to green power. They just make it up as they go along, don't they? There's another one of Ed Millipede's brainchilds, no doubt. £24 a year, part of an effort to maintain energy security. Well, you've already stopped energy security by making sure that we don't produce any of our own energy. That's part of the problem, isn't it? And the transition to green power isn't working terribly well because it looks as though Nissan have just fired hundreds of people because of the green plan. And I'm afraid we see through you. 0344 499 1000. Mike says, Keith, so Stalin needs to consult with Ed Miliband about the net zero implications of spending hours drying his wool with a hairdryer. Founding the fixations. Very good. I like it. 7:34.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's the 1st of July, ladies and gentlemen. Wimbledon started off rather well for the various British bits of the contingent, so we'll bring you news on that coming up. Rupert Bell's going to be down there for us later on. Morning, Mike. Love the show. Listening from beautiful Croatia this morning, says Brian. Starmer couldn't get a toy train back on track, never mind the NHS. How about Darren? He's got a voice note for us.
Good morning, Mike. It's Darren from Carmarthenshire. Hope you're well. More of a serious comment from me today, Mike. I know you're used to getting the old light-hearted quips from me, but I did want to touch on something serious today. It's the NHS, Mike. I used to work for the NHS, Mike, in procurement, to be more precise. And I can tell you now, Mike, that come the end of the financial year, virtually every department in the NHS scrambles to spend the remainder of their budget for that particular year, Mike, in terms of ordering leather, high-end leather chairs for the offices and sofas for the directors so they can just chill out in the office and so on. It's unbelievable, Mike, some of the stuff that's being spent at the end of each financial year, for the simple reason that that budget gets renewed if it's fully spent. So that's where I would start, Mike, if I was in charge of the NHS and I wanted to cut back on some budgets. That's certainly a good starting point as far as I can tell, Mike. Have a good day.
Darren, thank you very much indeed, and appreciate the serious note. From time to time, it's important to be serious. And absolutely right, the NHS is badly run, and always has been badly run. They're going to put billions and billions of more pounds into it to try and fix it. Starmer's going to make another announcement this week, he says, because I think he goes to the NHS whenever he thinks it's a safe place to go. He says he's going to get the NHS back on track. He's going to give them another 30 billion. I mean, what's going to happen to it? Even the NHS said it's just going to disappear into a massive black hole. In terms of where people are, by the way, Joe says this, common sense alive and well, from Narita Airport in Japan. Very good. Thank you very much indeed. See if we can do better than that. Let's talk to Simon Danchuk now, though, former Labour MP and Reform defector, it says here. Simon, very good morning to you.
Good morning. It's good to be with you, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us on this auspicious occasion, just a few days short of the anniversary of 1 year of Labour government, Simon. And it's been an absolute shambles, hasn't it? We're calling it 12 months of chaos here.
It really has. I mean, Starmer's had an absolute terrible 12 months. The country's had a terrible 12 months. I mean, his leadership has been found to be failing, and all that comes to a head, as you say. On Saturday, it's exactly 1 year since they won the general election. But tonight, it'll be the vote on the disability benefits issue. And he's really struggling on this. It sort of encapsulates the problems that he's had over the last 12 months.
Right. And, you know, for all of his standing tough and talking about wanting to fight for what he believes is right, you know, he then goes away and does his kind of international statesman thing in Canada for the G7. Then he's over in the Netherlands for NATO. And even Brian Abbott's seen through it. She's going, you know, is he seriously going to expect us to believe that he didn't know that the welfare bill remedies were unpalatable by the backbench MPs because he was abroad?
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. He's not on top of his brief, is he? And this all comes about because Rachel Reeves has failed to balance the books. And so they've had to lop billions off the benefits bill. Now, we all agree that we need some radical reform of the benefit system, no doubt about that. But just top slicing money off it, taking it off disabled people, is not the answer. What is really interesting here, Mike, is that you can see people jockeying for position. Starmer has had to come out and say this is not a vote of confidence in him. Right. Well, I think it is. You've got literally dozens of Labour MPs who are going to vote against this tonight. And a second reading of legislation hasn't been lost by a government since 1986. If he loses this, he's significantly on the way out. I mean, there's no
I don't think there's any question. I mean, I read a piece last night in which it quoted an MP, a Labour MP, who said this doesn't feel like somebody standing up to the opposition in his party. It feels like the end of days. It feels like somebody who's wholly just focused on gripping onto power when it's literally ebbing away from his very fingernails. Andy Burnham is voting against, is advising people to vote against it. Sadiq Khan doing the same thing. You know, it's very clear that the wolves are circling, aren't they?
Oh, no doubt about that. And if you take those two examples, Andy Burnham and Sadiq Khan, you might think, well, they need to be MPs before they can challenge for the leadership. But, you know, I follow the minutiae of Labour Party politics so that you and your listeners don't have to. But Andrew Gwynn, you'll recall, with the Trigger Me Timbers WhatsApp group, he's a Greater Manchester MP. He could well resign because of that issue. He's already been made independent. If he goes, and he's very close to Burnham, then Burnham could fight the by-election in that seat. Yes. And then in terms of Sadiq Khan, if you look at Tulip Sadiq, who's had real problems as the MP for Hampstead and Highgate in terms of allegations of corruption around a wider family in Bangladesh, then if she goes, then Sadiq Khan would easily fight that seat, and they're close as well. So these people are jockeying him for position. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's have a look at what Starmer said when he was at the G7. I mean, it seems like an age ago now, an eon ago, and when he had a very, very different view of his position.
Well, we need to drive through reform in the welfare system. It's not working for anyone. It's not a confidence vote. It's a vote. It's a vote
you
about
don't see
reform.
it like that.
It's about a vote about reform of our welfare system. It isn't working. It doesn't help people into work. Quite the contrary.
See, he sounds still quite arrogant and quite sort of stick in the mud like, which is part of his problem, because when we were looking at all of this last week when he was away, you know, Labour MPs were saying, we don't know him. We don't see him. You know, he doesn't hang out in the tea room. He doesn't talk to people. It's almost as though, you know, ordinary Labour MPs are beneath him. Some have not even yet met him.
Yeah, that's right. And contrast that with some of the previous Labour Prime Ministers. You know, you would, I understand, regularly see Tony Blair walking through the voting lobby. Yeah. And that's a chance for backbench MPs to have a word with the leader, to cosy up to them, or to, you know, offer some constructive criticism. But Starmer hasn't even been going through the voting lobby.
No, he's only done it 7 times, apparently.
Yeah, he hasn't been voting for his own legislation. Yeah. And all this stuff makes a massive difference. And so he's been failing in terms of, rallying the troops within the Parliamentary Labour Party. And now it's all coming on to roost. And I have to say, I made this point to a Labour colleague, a Labour guy, recently. I mean, when you see him speaking like you do there, he doesn't look like he's in full control. He looks like he's beginning to lose control of his situation. He really does.
Oh, I think there's no doubt about that. I mean, when Dan Hodges, who was a pretty good Labour loyalist over time, writes in the Mail today, it's the most cack-handed, incompetent welfare bill in living memory, and that's just the headline. He talks about Liz Kendall's performance yesterday. Virtually every penny of her £5 billion saving has vanished, right? So they're not going to get any benefit from that really whatsoever. When she was asked yesterday how all of these U-turns would be funded, she couldn't answer. MPs were told, we'll deal with that at the next fiscal event. And the trouble is, like many things that they've set out to do, they found that halfway through it, they couldn't do it. So they've had to U-turn and go, we're not going to bother with that now. We're going to go and do something else. But they don't have an answer. They don't have a solution to where they're going to get this money from, which has already been fed into the system.
That's exactly right. It's all about the money. They're just trying to make dramatic cuts. And the irony is, they came into government saying, well, we've found this £22 billion black hole. It's took 12 months and Rachel Reeves has created a giant black hole of her own making.
Well,
and this is part of the solution.
It's now about 10 times bigger, isn't it? Because, I mean, she borrows about 20 billion a month just to keep the payments up.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And it's almost in November that she was saying, listen, she was saying in the city, there will be no more tax rises.
Yeah.
That will not stand now. There's going to have to be tax rises because she's run the economy that badly. It's a really desperate, serious situation, in actual fact.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there are people who worry as well about the fiscal possibilities that might afflict the country in the coming months, because it's not entirely out of the question that because of the high level of borrowing and because of the low level of growth, that this country was going to become going to get to a sort of fiscal crisis very shortly.
Yeah, people are talking about that more and more, and this is what they're trying to fend off. But we have a Prime Minister and a Chancellor that are on the ropes, to say the least, and that's within their own party, never mind the wider public. This is the most unpopular Prime Minister Britain has ever had at this stage in an electoral cycle. I think he'll struggle to last 12 months. I really do think that.
Yeah, absolutely right. But we'll watch with interest and see. I mean, I still think there's a chance that they could either lose the vote altogether tonight because the amount of rebellion is even bigger than they think, or he gets cold feet at the last minute, and even though he's going to have to suffer the slings and arrows of doing it, he just pulls the vote altogether.
I think that's possible. I think there were 126 rebels at one stage, and now that's down to about 50 odd.
Yeah.
But that's not nailed on. I think, as you were suggesting, the number of rebels will continue to increase throughout the day, and the vote's possibly not until about 7 p.m.
Right.
And if it's looking desperate, he'll be keeping in touch with the whips. As you said, they might well pull the legislation.
Yeah.
That'd be exceptionally embarrassing for the government.
It would, because every time he opens his mouth, he makes it worse. I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Simon, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Simon Danchuk there, former Labour MP, literally telling us that Keir Starmer has got the skids under him. I said this to you many, many months ago. People have said to me on social media, you'd be so every month. Yeah, but you can see the progress that he's made. You can see how difficult his time has been. It started bad and fell away, as my father used to explain. This is him being heckled last year at Doncaster Racecourse. Booed and heckled, and that was just about a few weeks into his prime ministership. That was the beginning, and that was how good it was at the beginning. Where it is now, God knows what. I don't think he could even go out in public for what the abuse he would suffer. Let's get a voice note from Paula.
Morning, Mike. Paula in Liverpool. Great show as usual. We're done for, aren't we? Yeah, it's great that the Sun are rounding up all these migrants and they're getting arrested. What will happen to them then? They'll just go into a jail where we'll have to pay £50,000 to hold them for a year. That is if there's a place for them. Will they get deported? No, probably not. So, bit of a pointless episode. I think we should all just give up and leave. Thanks, Mike. Bye.
I know,
Paula.
well, this is what people are saying. Me too, says Chris in Croydon. I'm 58 and currently investigating taking my family and living and working in Greece. The last few governments have wrecked this country and it's not going to get any better. We have weak and in many cases extremely thick politicians who are guided by a politically incorrect civil service with significantly flawed dogma and a mainstream media that is controlled by left-leaning, corduroy trouser-wearing, soft-shoe, left-wing, bearded softies. Time to lock the door, wave goodbye and go and live, work and pay my taxes to a country that appreciates me. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of that going on. I know so many people who are telling me they're considering just upping sticks and leaving. Incredible. Mike, do you realise that the footage you keep showing of Labour MPs pulling pints has Jonathan Reynolds standing in from front of a beer tap called Proper Job? Stuart, I haven't noticed that, but we will look out for it now. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. At 7:49.
The story is that he was approached and said, look, they've just shouted death, death to the IDF. And he said to carry on screening them, carry on live streaming them. So now not only are there calls for David to be sacked, but also that he too should be investigated for effectively encouraging blatant law breaking. He's done nothing but stagger from one hapless crisis to the next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. I'm Mike Graham with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. Andy from Mansfield says, you keep mentioning a train. For those others outside the M25, can you tell us what a train is? Is it one of those things I remember from my childhood with lots of steaming smoke coming out the chimney? Well, the reason we're talking about trains this morning, of course, is the Royal Train is going to be decommissioned. Peter Blexley was here saying, why not turn it into a kind of tourist train like the Orient Express? Take it around Britain into various different sort of very picturesque parts of the country and make it into an attraction. Not a bad idea. It is, of course, one of the few trains, as people have pointed out, that runs on time. My son was due to come and see me last night on a train. It was 90 minutes late coming from Manchester. An hour and a half late. I mean, you just can't run a service like that. It's ridiculous. Let's talk to David Spencer, though. He's Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange. Believe it or not, forget about what's going on with the Palestine Action Brigade and all the people that are out there chanting death, death to the IDF, which is what seems to be now the popular thing to do. Extinction Rebellion are back, and we need to know why. David, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Morning, Mike. Good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. My spies have managed to find out that there's a bit of action being drawn up for July, including something that starts today, July the 1st, Rhythm Rebels band practice in Cardiff. They're signing people up, Extinction Rebellion are, because they say, we've had the warmest spring on record in the UK, the driest for over 50 years, the Paris climate threshold has been breached, an average global warming hit 1.6 degrees in 2024. I thought these guys had given up their direct action. I thought that was what they were going to do.
Well, that's the thing, Mike. These groups have certainly never gone away, and they are well financed and they're highly well organised campaign groups, and we have seen these groups repeatedly prosecuted because of their actions, and they've gone nowhere, I'm afraid. Yeah. And what we know is that their intention, as it has always been, is to be as disruptive as they can be through their sort of summer campaign. What we've seen these sorts of groups do repeatedly, and you'll have seen this yourself, I know you've shown this repeatedly on the show, is that they seek to disrupt workplaces. These are groups which are willing to block roads and generally be a nuisance to disrupt members of the public going about their daily lives. So I think we can expect to see that again this summer. Yeah, and we've seen a bit of a crossover, haven't we, in recent times, where there hasn't been too much activity on the climate front, and instead they've all gone for the pro-Palestine business. We've seen Greta Thunberg, go from the, the doom goblin of climate change to kind of, freeing the people of Gaza on a ship of shame that she took over to that part of the world. So, I mean, they're all kind of rolled into one at this point, aren't they? Well, this is one of the really interesting features that we at Policy Exchange have been tracking, is the crossover between these groups. Yeah. And as an example, you'll remember the protest in London only last week or so by Palestine Action. And what we saw there was a whole collection of groups that were involved in that protest. And certainly one of them was Just Stop Oil, so another sort of climate environmental group. And there is definitely a crossover between those involved in these campaigns. And that's one of the interesting features that we've been seeing probably over the last couple of years or so. And we've also been told in recent times by people from the Home Office that certainly Palestine Action, who get quite a lot of their money from a rather eccentric billionaire over in America, who I think is attached to the Cox family in some way, shape or form. I think his name's Chambers. There's some suggestion that there may be funding coming from, other states in terms of, bad actors, if you like Iran and other countries in the Middle East who might be, it might be in their interest to kind of fund these organisations. Well, much of this is pretty shadowy, as you've alluded to, yeah. And the details are very, very rarely clear. I think what is very clear is that we see foreign hostile states doing all sorts of things, trying to sow discord in the United Kingdom. We've seen that with all sorts of recent events. We see that on social media and in all sorts of things. So it would not be a huge leap for other states to get involved in financing different groups. Although, as I say, it is all sort of clouded and pretty shadowy. So we have currently no way of knowing what that looks like. No, quite. And I mean, have the police learned anything, do you think, from all of this? They still seem to be, relatively unclear as to how they deal with people like Extinction Rebellion and Palestinian disputes and Palestine. I mean, we saw just yesterday outside Woolwich Crown Court a whole load of people chanting, death to the IDF, which has apparently caused an investigation into Glastonbury by Avon and Somerset Police, but Metropolitan Police were just standing by watching them. Well, what we've seen is that when the police want to, they really can be highly effective. Yeah. So as I say, this protest that was in Westminster, that was intended to be outside the Houses of Parliament just a week or so ago, the police put pretty extensive conditions, which they're able to do under the law, on that group, and they were able to make sure that there was no disruption to Parliament on that day. So what we know is that the police do have the powers to take action and that they are able and willing to use them. And the question will be, are they willing and able to use them with this disruption that's likely to come up through the summer? And I think that's the real question. The other question here is, what are the discussions that go on in the background between these protest groups and the police?
Yeah.
So that's another thing that's a bit shadowy. We don't know what the bargain is that gets struck between protest groups and the police, and that's really something that needs to have a light shined on it.
Yeah, I think so. Good to speak to you, David Spencer. Thank you very much indeed, Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange. The rise, once again, of Extinction Rebellion coming back in this summer, apparently, for a few events, including a funeral for nature in Bournemouth and a climate camp in Scotland towards the end of July. It's going to go for a week. That'll be smelly, I can be sure. Let's have a look back into the Starmer archives. Here he is talking about cleaning up politics.
Change Britain, we must change ourselves. We need to clean up politics. I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism.
A total crackdown on cronyism. Yeah, of course. His best mate, Lord Herbert's the Attorney General. One of his best friends, Tulip Siddiq, was given a job in the Cabinet to be in charge of corruption until she had to resign from Cabinet because she was accused of corruption by the Bangladeshi authorities. It's all fantastic, isn't it? How about this from Gary? Oh, there isn't any time. No, we'll come back to Gary. I think we play that in the next hour. Coming up in the next hour, we'll talk some more about what on earth is going wrong with the BBC. Sean in Gloucester says this: the BBC is the Keith Stalin of the broadcasting world. I haven't watched anything on there for years. It needs shutting down. Donald Trump summed up most things in the clip. They don't know what they're doing. We might have to play that again this week. We've been sort of a bit lax on that one. Yeah, coming up, Sir John Curtis joins us, top pollster, political scientist. He's the one that says nobody knows what Keir Starmer stands for. Nobody knows why he's doing what he's doing, and that's why he's had the worst start to his prime ministership than any prime minister ever in the history of Britain. Extraordinary. We'll be back after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right.
A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time round. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham here with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. It's the 1st of July, ladies and gentlemen. There's plenty going on. If you've only just joined us, what have you been doing? Where have you been? We've got all sorts going on. Rebel MPs are set to humiliate the Prime Minister today, just a couple of days shy of his first anniversary of being Prime Minister. All sorts of pieces being written about him. I'm going to do a couple as well, because the year of chaos that we have seen has been, quite frankly, absolutely and utterly preposterous, has it not? This is a guy who's been travelling around the world trying to make peace, trying to build bridges, trying to say that he's going to be the guy that ties the European Union with Donald Trump. Seems to have forgotten about all of that. He wanted to be the man that made Volodymyr Zelensky at home. He wanted to be the guy that gave him the biggest hug. He wanted to get close to Macron. He wanted to do a deal with the Canadians. He went over to see Mark Carney in Canada at the G7. But unfortunately, it distracted him from all of the things that he should have been doing here. According to an interview he gave last week to the Sunday Times and to the New Statesman and to the Observer, in a sort of personal insight, he said he had been distracted when he was at the G7 and when he was at NATO, so he wasn't able to work out how difficult it was to get this welfare bill through. And it turns out that all the rebels who have been rebelling against him and have been trying to tell him that they're going to rebel against him have all been ignored purely and simply because he was distracted by being on the world stage. Even Diane Abbott isn't buying that one. She said, "Are you seriously telling me that this Prime Minister didn't realise how bad this bill was because he was abroad?" And then he says, of course, that the reason he made that speech that he now regrets making about the land of strangers that Britain might become if there was too much immigration, he says he was distracted about that because, of course, somebody tried to firebomb his house and his car and another property that he didn't have anything to do with anymore, but used to. It's all very strange, isn't it? Meanwhile, Labour rebels accuse Starmer of breaking welfare promises. This is the vote later on tonight. He's been watering down the welfare bill in order to try and make sure it gets through, but there's no guarantee that it will, and even if it does, there's no guarantee that the number of people voting against it will not embarrass him hugely. He's got a massive majority, but it's called a loveless majority, and he can't seem to get anywhere close to getting things pushed through Parliament. Meanwhile, the BBC are still deep in the doo-doo. It turns out that the Director General, the man who is supposed to be in charge of the organisation, Tim Davie, was not only all across what was going out on the network over the weekend at Glastonbury, he was actually down there himself, having a great time. Apparently he was going to visit the 500-odd people that were working there. Easier to see them there, I suppose, than at work. They don't bother coming to work. They work from home when they work at the BBC and Broadcasting House. They don't work from home when they go to Glastonbury. So he went down there to see him. He gets a call from Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, to say, "What on earth are you putting out on the BBC? There's a bloke shouting death to the IDF, you complete plonker." And what did he say? He said, "Sorry, darling, I can't hear you. Kneecap her on. I'll call you back." And that's, I suppose, the way it all works. It's 8:05. I'm Mike Graham. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on.
They don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Oh, by the way, I don't know if you just heard the news there. Can we just replay? We heard a woman on the news there talking about her PIP allowance, OK? We don't need to know what her name is, but if we just have a listen to her saying this is why she's worried about losing her allowance. Check it out.
I use it to pay for my private mental health therapy. In addition, it goes to having to pay for taxis to get everywhere. Even if I live close by, I have to taxi everywhere because I don't get a free bus pass because they've tightened the regulations for that up.
So you don't get a free bus pass, and so you have to now get a free taxi instead because you can't go anywhere on your own. I mean, what's going on in this country? I don't know what her circumstances are. There's no point in me, vilifying her individually. But it just, to me, it seems to me to be a sort of, a great example of what's gone wrong with the welfare system in this country. People think that if they don't get a free bus pass anymore, they must then be entitled instead to a free taxi. I don't know where she's going. Seems to me to be that it's all been allowed to run completely and utterly ragged and out of control, doesn't it? Let's talk to Sir John Curtis, the pollster of pollsters, the man who knows everything there is to know about psephology and how things work in the world of politics. Sir John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Good to see you. You made quite a few feathers ruffle the other day when you appeared on Times Radio and you told everybody that Keir Starmer was the most unpopular Prime Minister and had the worst start, I think, of any Prime Minister, whether Labour or Conservative in recent memory or perhaps in history.
Yes, well, I was looking in particular at the record of newly elected governments. And as compared with newly elected governments, this government saw its support fall more substantially and more rapidly than any previous elected one. Of course, we do have to remember here a crucial point. This is a government that, despite that landslide majority, only got 35% of the vote. That is the lowest share of the vote ever won by any government with a majority. So it's not as though this was a government that was elected with enthusiasm. Back in July of last year, a major reason for its majority is actually the movement of voters from Conservative to Reform, which then helped Labour to pick up many a Conservative-held seat. And this is why, this is something's been said for quite some considerable time, is why sometimes last year's result is referred to as a loveless marriage. In other words, this was a government that started off with a relatively shallow basis of support. And it's just that we've discovered that it's fallen away pretty rapidly. On average now, Labour at the moment in the polls are at 24%. That's 11 points down on that 35. So they've lost nearly a third of their support. It's not occurred with some particular event or suddenly. It started in the early autumn of last year. It persisted gradually, or certainly all the way through to last month. It now seems to have flattened out. But this has just been a government that's gradually seen its support erode. Yeah. And it's led by a Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who has never been popular with the public. Throughout his position as opposition leader, he was always in net negative favourability territory. He was always less widely regarded than his party. And that is still the position now. And that, again, was a fundamental political weakness that he had so far as the electorate is concerned, that inevitably has continued to be a problem for him now that he's become Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think that's part of the Labour problem in government, isn't it? Because while you say it might have plateaued a little bit now and it's kind of flattened out, his unpopularity, if you like, his disapproval rating continues to plummet. I mean, I was looking at it on Sunday on Laura Kunsberg's show. According to Ipsos Mori, he's at minus 54 now, and they pointed out that after the first year of government, Tony Blair was plus 34, and even David Cameron, who wasn't the world's greatest loved Prime Minister, was only at minus 3. So he's at minus 54. That's catastrophic, isn't it?
Yeah, it does mean he's not doing quite as badly as Rishi Sunak or John Major did at the worst problems of their premiership, but he's certainly, it's not a very, very happy figure. And we are, we're talking here about a politician who, in a sense, has a fundamental problem if you're going to be a political leader, and that is he doesn't have a clear story about what his government is about, what it's trying to achieve, and above all, what kind of country he wants to create. I mean, insofar as he's had a message as Prime Minister, it's been, look, the last government made, in my view, a big mess of it. We are the repairmen, and women. We're going to come in and fix the problems. But that still leaves the question, well, but what do you want to do thereafter? Oh, and by the way, and how are you going to do it? And of course, one of the reasons why the government's run into trouble is that some of the ways in which it decided it wants to repair the problems, not least its fiscal constraint, has been through these cuts on welfare, which have proven to be rather unpopular. A, because this is not the kind of thing that many people expect a Labour government to do if they are Labour supporters. And B, unlike Tony Blair, this was not ground that was prepared in advance. The last Labour government under Tony Blair was heavily critical of the welfare bill. It said that Margaret Thatcher had wasted a lot of money, particularly the money we had from North Sea oil in the 1980s, on paying people unemployment benefit. It tried to get the welfare benefit bill down. But the point is that was ground that was laid before the government got into government, albeit some people were still surprised about what they did. There was no inkling from Labour that any of this was going to happen before last year's election. Therefore, it's much more difficult to sell not only to his MPs, but also to the wider public.
Right. And I think one of the problems he's had over selling himself and the party to the wider public is that he puts out an awful lot of statements, particularly on social media, but also sometimes just when he's speaking, which turn out to be completely untrue. And you kind of have the opinion that he sort of knows that they're untrue. I mean, we've been going through the archives here because it's the week that it is, and, he's coming up to a year in power. I mean, have a look at this. This is when he talks about Rachel Reeves and how well she was doing.
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Well, she may well have, but she's had a terrible performance as Chancellor. The economy is flatlining at best. There are people losing their jobs hand over fist as a direct result of what she did in November in her budget. You know, April was only the beginning of people losing jobs. I mean, Nissan only yesterday announced they're going to sack a few hundred people, not just because of the Labour government, but it makes it look like it's their fault. You know what I mean?
Well, I think my attitude, Mike, is that when a Prime Minister has to stand up and say, I have full confidence in my Chancellor, you know that the Chancellor is in a certain amount of political difficulty.
Yes, I mean, it certainly would seem that way. Up until now, people have said to me, basically, he won't get rid of her because that would make him look bad. But they've now started to turn on that and say, actually, by the looks of things, she won't last even as long as he's going to last, which may not be the full term.
Well, it's certainly, I mean, one of the reasons why perhaps she's in difficulty, not least including with her parliamentary colleagues, is the perception that the welfare cuts, the benefit cuts that we're still arguing about and on which there's going to be a vote later today, that the motivation for that was primarily guided by the wish to try and ensure that, according to the OBR forecaster last March, that it would indeed say, you know, the Chancellor was meeting her rules, and that it was therefore rushed in order to try to achieve that, rather than necessarily being a thought-through attempt to try and deal with what, you know, many Conservative politicians are arguing, let alone a Labour one, is a welfare bill that is rising too high. And I think I've just heard you, Mike, raise one or two questions about the welfare bill. So I think in a sense, while we might want to argue about how the government has handled this, we clearly do have to decide as a society as to what extent we think it is reasonable to be supporting people who do meet extra costs as a result of disability or as a result of long-term illness. But clearly, because there are now more people in that category, we are finding that the bill is rising quite substantially.
Yes, quite. Let me ask you about the Tories and reform, because, you know, we talk about a loveless majority for the Labour government coming in. The reform vote seems pretty solid to me. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, you know, polls can't be trusted, particularly during elections. But the MCP poll that came out just last week from YouGov, I think it was, first one since the election, had reform certainly winning the majority of seats in Parliament. Maybe not enough for a full, you know, sort of autonomous government, if you like. But it looks to me like that vote is a fairly solid vote.
Well, let me say two things. I mean, the first is that I think there probably was a feeling among some politicians, including on the Labour side, that perhaps the polls were exaggerating what reform were capable of achieving. But I think that view, insofar as it was abroad, was disabused by the result of the English County Council elections at the beginning of May. And I think, again, one of the reasons why Labour MPs are now rebelling against their Prime Minister and willing to do so is that they have decided that indeed the polls are right, that Labour are behind reform in the polls, and that therefore the party needs to get much more clearly on a front foot that is acceptable to their supporters. And all Prime Ministers tend to lose their authority if they're behind in the opinion polls and their MPs come to doubt as to whether or not they're going to be able to lead them to success in the next election. The second thing I would say to you, it's certainly a mistake to think that the reform vote is some general protest. It's a very, very heavily located in a particular section of our society. And I can drive it home to you by saying that amongst those people who voted Leave in the 2016 referendum, support for reform is running at 50%. Amongst those who voted Remain, the party is struggling to pick up very much at all. In other words, Nigel Farage is appealing very successfully to those people who are, yes, in favour of Brexit, concerned about immigration, are not very keen on equalities policies, all these things about the so-called culture wars issues that Reform are focusing on. And in doing that, Reform are actually primarily taking votes off the Conservatives. I think the Conservatives do now face a really major challenge for their future, given what Nigel Farage has achieved so far. It's a problem for Labour because Reform at 30% can take seats off Labour by winning over more Conservative voters in the way they last year, but it's for the Conservatives above all that Reform are at the moment posing a long-term challenge.
Right. And long-term, do the Conservatives have a future? Because I put this sometimes to Conservative Party MPs because I'm not even sure that they know, but they have an identity crisis in the same way that Keir Starmer does, don't they?
I think the honest truth is, Mike, that one of the things that was clear from the wake of last year's general election is that the whole future of our electoral politics is perhaps up for grabs in a way.
Yeah.
So certainly it's not been true during my lifetime. Fewer than 3 in 5 people voted for either Labour or Conservative. It was a record low. In the polls at the moment, it's down to around 2 in 5. Again, a record low. There is a risk that, so far as Conservative and Labour is concerned, that voters who do now have more options, it's not just reform attacking the Conservatives. The Greens are also potentially a problem for Labour, as are Liberal Democrats. And of course, in Scotland, although the SNP are not as strong as they were, they're still currently the most popular party north of the border. Electoral politics is more fragmented. And also it means that, therefore, whether Conservative or Labour can look forward to the continued joint dominance of our politics in the way they've had for the most of the second period since the Second World War, that is certainly now very much open to question.
Yeah, absolutely right. Sir John Curtis, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Sir John Curtis, the pollster, saying that Keir Starmer has a massive problem. What's Kerry Baden not doing with those guns, by the way? I mean, that's not a great look, is it? She's walking around with machine guns. There she is. There was actually Harry Cole wrote in his column yesterday. There's one moment where she picks up some binoculars and starts looking through them, and somebody takes a picture of them, but they haven't taken the caps off the end, so you actually wouldn't be able to see anything at all. I don't think politicians and military hardware go well together. It's like putting Keir Starmer in a camouflage jacket. It doesn't really work. This from Bill in Cheshire. My daughter is a successful high-level earner, but she and most of her colleagues refuse any salary increases that take them above £100,000. It's simply not worth having due to tax. Instead, they take the pay rise by buying extra holiday days and other stuff, which is not a benefit in kind. This £100,000 aspiration barrier is no way to grow the economy, says Bill in Cheshire. And here's Gary on cleaning up politics.
Now, giving it some thought, and I want to run for reform in this part of the world because of a number of reasons. Now, I've been a project manager for many years. I've run businesses, banks, all that. I've never seen so many businesses like the NHS who waste so much money on so many different things. And I think that someone with my skill set, being in this type of industry, restructuring businesses, I think could help reform and help this country because I'm fed up of, what's going on with this government. And I've never thought about politics until now, but I think it's time.
Gary, I think you speak for a lot of people. They never thought about politics until it started to, upset their lives and started to actually affect their lives. And when you start being told that the government's clamping down on this tax, or they're going to start taxing you more money, or you're going to start paying more national insurance, or they're going to start getting into your ridiculous private life, and they're going to tell you what you can do as far as when you can abort a child, when you can assist the death of another person in your family. When they start to affect every single part of your life, every aspect of it, and they start to really, really cheese you off, for want of a better phrase, you then start to get involved, and maybe that's a good thing. 8:20.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:24. I'm Mike Graham. Matt from Bognor Regis says this: I get really irritated, but the lazy layabouts of this country standing there holding out their hands, expecting to be kept by the state. How dare they? And on a side note, can someone please explain? Well, yeah, exactly right. I mean, we just heard at the top of the hour there from some woman who's on the news talking about how she can't any longer get her PIP in the future because she's worried about what the welfare bill will do. But have a listen to what she says.
I use it to pay for my private mental health therapy. In addition, it goes to having to pay for taxis to get everywhere. Even if I live close by, I have to taxi everywhere because I don't get a free bus pass because they've tightened the regulations for that up.
So you don't get a free bus pass anymore, so you get benefits so that you can pay for a free taxi. That seems to make a lot of financial sense, does it? Let's get a voice note from Lisa on the NHS.
Morning, Mike. It's Lisa from Canterbury. All this, prioritising UK doctors and all of that. We're talking about within the NHS. The NHS will never change until somebody goes straight to the top and gets rid of the management that can't manage the system. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that one. Bit of breaking news just before we speak to Ryan Saby. Major high street brand Clark's Shoes has cut 1,200 jobs, sales fall by nearly £100 million. The firm's blaming, in their words, challenging market conditions. So all bad news for Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves there. We were talking just before about Nissan losing hundreds of jobs up in Sunderland. This is now Clark's Shoes cutting 1,200 jobs. Let's talk to Ryan Saby, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun. Ryan, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Some of this sort of bad news seems to be literally just pouring in now by the day, just as Keir Starmer gets ready to probably not celebrate his 1 year anniversary, but at least to commemorate it in some way.
Yeah, that's right. You see that news there with Clark's cutting jobs on the back of disappointing sales. I think one of the reasons why they're cutting jobs, you've had that national insurance rise that's kicked in back in April, just a couple of months ago, and I just feel that things are starting to bite for companies. They saw it coming, they're preparing, but when they're paying all that extra money in those extra employment costs, it's really, really hurting. And one thing that we've seen over the last couple of days, we've seen business confidence surveys from the CBI, the Business Group, and also the Institute of Directors, and both of them are saying that business confidence has just been chipped away in recent months, and the CBI says that they've had the sort of the longest run of business pessimism that they've had since since the pandemic. Yeah. So I think that's the real harsh reality, and things are just going to get tougher.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, the problem for Keir Starmer is there isn't really any good news out there on the horizon. I mean, tonight's welfare bill, he was hoping to come back from NATO last week and somehow talk everybody off the ledge and somehow give enough concessions to the Labour rebels that this would all go through. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen, does it?
No, it's going to be a very, very difficult day for Sir Keir Starmer. I imagine he's got cabinet first thing this morning, and after that he will be hitting the phones. He'll be inviting MPs into his Commons office or getting them over to Downing Street to try and cajole them and arm twist them into actually backing this bill. Now, it seems like the bill should get through, but I think the key thing to watch is how big is the size of that rebellion, because it's a big thing to vote against the government at what we call the second reading, which is voting on the principle of the bill. Now, I think it'd be interesting to see how many actually vote against this legislation and how many the whips and Downing Street actually managed to peel off and get them to actually abstain. But last night we were hearing numbers of maybe 40 or 50 seriously thinking about actually voting against this. But let's just watch those numbers and also those names of those sort of reasonably big hitters, those grandees in the party who will vote against it tonight.
Right. And, I mean, whatever version of the bill goes through, if it does go through, it will be a very pale imitation of what it was meant to be, which will provide no respite financially for the government at all. You know, it looks like something like $4.5 billion out of the $5 billion they wanted has kind of disappeared. So it's not really worth the paper it's written on, is it?
Exactly. I think one of the things you look at this, and Keir Starmer spoke about this before the election, it was in that Labour manifesto, they were talking about reform of the welfare system. Now, the amount of money they're actually saving, even when it was £5 billion, a lot of people were saying this is just tinkering around the edges. Well, they seem to have scaled back on this, offering major concessions to the rebels just to get this legislation through. And now it seems that they may actually only save about half of that. But the trouble is, once you've got that £2.5 billion that they may have to find to fund these concessions, you add that to the winter fuel allowance as well, the U-turn on that. It starts adding up to quite a few £1 billion. And that financial cushion that Rachel Reeves had of around £10 billion is just being chipped away and chipped away. Every time the Labour rebels jump up and say, look, we don't like this, it just seems that number 10 throws them a bone and it costs them even more money. So the summer is going to be very, very difficult for Rachel Reeves as she tries to work out how she's going to balance the books and get the public finances into shape.
Exactly right. Just one thing to mention before you go. Great front page again in The Sun. Did somebody say just nicked the latest instalment in the migrant food delivery bikers? Now they've been arrested by a bunch of immigration police. What happens to them now?
Well, I think these people will be fully investigated by the police. I guess they'll be brought in for interview at some stage, but also we hear yesterday the Riot Act was read to actually the bosses of these companies, Just Eat, Uber Eats, Deliveroo. So not only does something has to happen on a corporate level, but there has to be stronger checks on those immigrants, those people who are working for these companies. But the people who may be working here illegally, they will feel the full force of the law. So, you know, there will be investigations into this. And Yvette Cooper praised The Sun yesterday, actually commended The Sun for their actions and actually exposing this and highlighting this in recent days.
Yeah, well, it's been a great job, a great campaign. Ryan, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Doreen Sabey there, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun. Another great story in The Sun about illegal migrants today. It's online, this one. A document was found outside the Asylum Hotel revealing that migrants are entitled to, guess what? Free NHS site test prescriptions, free dental treatment, free glasses, free fabric supports, and wait for it, free wigs. Wigs? Why are they getting free wigs? What do they need those for? They come off in the wind anyway when you're riding the fake bikes, aren't they? Don't they? Free wigs. Why are they getting free wigs? Marie's on voice notes. Have a look.
Morning, Mike. Great show as usual. Just regarding the Deliveroo drivers and Uber Eats and all those guys. I don't live in a big city. I live in Kent, just outside Maidstone. So when we get a Deliveroo or a Just Eat, they have to use a car. Now, I see these guys turn up and I keep saying to my partner, how come these non-English speaking guys can turn up here in a car that I couldn't afford to buy myself? You know, they can all drive, they all have cars. Where does this come from? Where does the money come from? How are they affording to run these cars? Maybe you should send The Sun down here and they can investigate what's going on in Kent.
Very good point. Yeah, it's hard to believe, isn't it? I mean, I know parts of Britain where, you know, these people don't operate on mopeds or bikes because there's hardly any of them. and there's not very many people that are covered by those businesses. But yeah, there's all sorts of rackets going on in this country. You just get the sense that it's all just very, very lawless, don't you? Let's have a look at what's going on the Sun letters page. And I'm afraid it's more bad news for the birthday boy, Keir Starmer. It's a very unhappy birthday, as Harry Cole said to him, coming up on July the 4th. Smarmy Starmer has to be this country's worst PM ever, says Keith in Surrey. How can he and his Labour Party justify giving benefits to illegal migrants at the expense of disabled people, pensioners and military veterans? If he got rid of the illegal migrants, he would have a budget that would support our citizens and our military. Clive says, by his own admission, Sir Keir Starmer says he did not get a grip on the Labour rebellion over disability benefits earlier because he was focused on foreign affairs. It is an astonishing admission by the Prime Minister that he can only give one issue his full attention. God help us if we end up at war with him as leader. Well, God help us indeed. He does say we're on a war footing, but I don't think he really means it. Do you? 0344 499 1000. Once again, the breaking news. Major high street brand Clark's Shoes have cut 1,200 jobs as sales fall by nearly £100 million. The firm are blaming challenging market conditions. Well, we all know who caused those, don't we? That's right. The Chancellor of the Exchequer. She's a woman. Yes, yes. It's Rachel Reeves. Yes. Isn't it great? 8:34.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
8:36 coming up to 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. We've got loads going on, of course, right now between here and then. We've been looking at all sorts of stories on the front pages as well as the stories inside. Big weekend coming up for Wimbledon. A big day yesterday at Wimbledon. It all kicked off with an awful lot of British players. 23, I think, the record number for the first week of the tournament. And they all did rather well yesterday, which is rather nice. We keep being told we have to pay top dollar to attract the best people into the civil service, says Mick in Walsall, but it looks like we just need a Sun reporter who leaves the office to crack all the problems with immigration. Well, that certainly seems to be true. Christina in Spain says Keir Starmer should employ Thomas from the Sun to smash his gangs. Thomas had more success single-handedly in smashing the illegal immigrant delivery gangs than anyone Starmer has employed, including, of course, the, do you remember the Borders commander? Who seems to be doing nothing at all. Never mind the borders. You just go down to some of these hotels, these migrant hotels, where people are all riding around on electric bikes supplied by food delivery companies. Let's get a voice note from Tim.
Hi, Mike. Tim in Halifax here, enjoying your show. I'm 60 years old. My wife's approaching 60. And in about 2 years, we're going to be financially in a position where we can fully retire. I would love to retire in this country and spend a lot of my savings and contribute to our economy, the country I've loved and grown up in. We're out of here. We're getting out. As soon as we fully retire, we're selling up and we're going to go somewhere else. We'll spend our money in a different country. This country's shot. It's finished. It's done.
I'll tell you what, Tim, that is a very, very powerful message, because an awful lot of people will hear that and go, maybe we can do the same thing. Maybe we can go retire somewhere else. Because, quite frankly, almost anywhere else in the world is cheaper than it is here. We just heard today that electricity prices are going up again. You know, the standard fee is going up by £34 every month. You're going to be paying more money for your water. You're going to be paying more money for most of your energy bill. You're going to be paying more money for anything that you buy in the shop, more for your food, more for your drink, more for your standard of living, more for your petrol. Everything is going up. And what the government doesn't tax at the moment, they're going to start taxing. So Tim's right. This country may well be shot. Now, we've been looking back at the Starmer archive because, of course, he's been in nearly a year. Hard to believe, isn't it? I don't think he's going to make a second year. But here he is talking about Rachel Reeves.
It will also be the first budget delivered by a woman ever. That is a moment of pride. When Rachel Reeves stands up, she will be making history. And I can tell you, young women and girls across the country will be watching, they will look up, and they will notice.
Yeah, they certainly will. They're still noticing as well how badly it's all going. Absolutely ridiculous. Coming up on Friday at 9 p.m, we've got this for you. Have a look.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
It really has been a disaster, hasn't it? Let's talk to Rupert Darwell, author of Green the Tyranny, because we haven't even started yet on net zero. But we've got a story today, Rupert, very good morning to you, that says that the ambition of old Ed Miliband is to cover over an area of Britain the size of the West Midlands in solar panels, 347 square miles, I think, by 2030, which will achieve precisely what? I don't really know. Tell us.
Well, it's to save the environment. They're going to destroy the environment. It's about the industrialisation of nature. It's absolutely reprehensible. We live in a beautiful country, or parts of it are beautiful, and they are going to cover it in wind turbines, in solar farms, and with new national grid pylons up and down the country.
I was staggered, actually. I was down in Margate a week or so ago, and looking across the sort of Thames estuary to Southend, I had no idea just how many wind wind machines there were in the sea. I mean, it's absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, I think those came in under David Cameron, actually, Mike. So this is very much, we shouldn't forget, this is actually, to say it's a bipartisan effort, we shouldn't forget the Lib Dems' awful involvement in this, and Ed Davey, when he had Ed Miliband's job, actually he was really one of the worst.
Yeah. Well, this is the trouble. I mean, you know, people worry about what they call the uni party, because they're all responsible for it. You know, this ridiculous net zero, you know, sort of race to nothing, because it was the Tories who kiboshed their own party. You know, even now, when I talk to Tory MPs and talk to them about the future of their party and whether it will have a place in politics in years to come, and I say, you know, and they say, oh yes, well we're very much, you know, looking at the targets, the net zero targets. They're not still walking away from it. They still think we should achieve net zero. They still can't explain what it is. They still don't know why.
Yeah, so Kemi Badenoch, in her speech that got a bit of applause, putting a question mark over net zero, said that her objection to net zero was that there wasn't a plan, which implies if there was a plan, she'd be supportive of it. They're not questioning the whole notion of net zero and the cost to the country and the insignificant effect it has on global emissions. As we know, Britain's emissions now are next to nothing. And as we outsource more and more of our manufacturing to China and the global south, the amount that we emit just shrinks and shrinks. But of course, the number of jobs we have also shrinks and shrinks.
And they keep talking about energy security while at the same time refusing to generate their own energy other than by the means of these so-called sustainable methods, which clearly aren't sustainable. I mean, it's the most ridiculously named thing ever, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they're weather dependent. Wind and solar are weather dependent. It completely depends on the weather. When it's sunny, you get quite a lot of solar, but of course, most of the year is not like this balmy 1st of July day.
No.
And the peak power needs in this country are on a early evening in winter. And of course, solar produces absolutely nothing then. And if there's a wind drought, as there can be, we are really in very, very difficult territory.
Yeah, what's that German word for it? Is it Dunkelkopf or something like that?
Yeah, Dunkelflaute.
Dunkelflaute, when there's not enough wind.
Wind drought.
Yeah, wind drought, yeah. But it doesn't make any sense to me at all, you know, and when we see things like GB Energy, which is a complete racket, you know, which appears to only employ about 1 or 2 people, Jürgen, the man at the helm of it, who sort of, you know, sits there without really very much to do. All it really is, it seems to me, is a funnel for public money to be put through to make it look as if people are investing in green energy, when they're really not, because all they're doing is taking taxpayers' money and pushing it through their system.
Yeah, the thing is that the subsidies for wind and solar are so generous that you've had queues of green rent seekers, green capitalists lining up to throw money at this. But of course it's all paid for by us out of our electricity and gas bills. And the fact is, Mike, every single extra wind turbine, every single extra solar panel means higher bills for ordinary people.
Yeah. And they keep telling us the bills are going to come down, but they keep not coming down. I mean, there's another story in the Mail today about the next Archbishop of Canterbury, who's going to have solar panels and heat pumps installed into Lambeth Palace. They're spending £40 million. They're calling it an eco makeover, right? With the hope that the 12th century palace bill for annual heating will go down from £52,000 a year to £30,000 a year. Well, I'm no mathematician, but that's a saving of £22,000. How long before you make back the £40 million?
Yeah, you never do. But the other thing, Mike, is that when people put solar panels on their roofs, like the Archbishop of Canterbury wants to do, when they sell back electricity to the grid, it's at the retail price, not the wholesale price, and the gap is made up by people who don't have solar panels. So it's actually a reverse Robin Hood tax. It's taking from poor people to rich people. So this is what the Church of England is now involved in, taking money from poor people.
Yeah. Well, I've just worked it out. I think at 22 billion, it's something £22,000 a year. So it would take sort of, you know, so £220,000 in 10 years. So it would take 50 years to save £1 million. So in order to save 40 million, I mean, they're talking millions of years before they get the money back.
It's total virtue signalling, which shows how the Church of England and indeed the previous Pope, he had, if you remember, he had that encyclical called Laudato Si, which was all about renewable energy and the war on global warming and so forth.
Yeah, it is absolutely extraordinary. And meanwhile, we've got the next climate change conference to look forward to in Brazil. I was speaking to Deanna Davidson, who's living there now, former Tory MP, who was saying some of the stuff that they're having to sort of do in order to prepare for this conference, like building hotels, you know, cutting a huge swathe of space through the Amazon rainforest to make a superhighway to take all the VIPs to the new hotels that they're building. I mean, the carbon footprint of what they're actually putting together is ludicrous.
Yeah, climate conferences are well known for being incredibly carbon intensive. What they are, Mike, is if you ever have the misfortune to go to one, they are essentially trade fairs for the climate industrial complex. Yeah. Anyone who's got their snout in a trough goes to these, and they exhibit how much their wares and how much more money they can take out of poor people, and how they're going to impoverish Africa by inflicting this nonsense on the developing world. It is the most appalling place to be.
Yeah. It really is. And of course, Ed Miliband only recently sent one of his aides over to make sure that the hotels were going to be suitable for him, wasting even more money.
Yeah, Ed Miliband, he was a critical voice at, do you remember the 2009 Copenhagen climate conference? That was the one Barack Obama turned up to. Gordon Brown said, I can't remember, 10 or 20 days to save the world. Do you remember we had the countdown to Copenhagen, and it completely flamed out? It was a total disaster because basically the Chinese, the Brazilians, the Indians, and the South Africans vetoed a climate treaty. So now we have this absurd thing where countries just make up their own commitments. So Britain is committed to net zero, and China is committed to peaking its emissions sometime after the turn of the century in 2060.
Yeah. It's all a joke, isn't it? They just want to create some kind of statement at the end of it, and they all... I mean, I think the peak sort of stupidity of it all was when they had the one in Dubai and Qatar, I think it was last time. It was just nonsense, wasn't it?
Yeah, actually, one could make the case that having it in the Gulf actually showed where power really is now in not just climate negotiations, but it's the global South that are the biggest emitters. They're the ones. They're the ones that have energy realism. They know that fossil fuels are absolutely essential to their economies, and we're climate delusionists, energy delusionists. We think we can power our economy on wind and solar. It's just, that is a form of insanity, Mike.
It really is, and thank goodness for people like yourself, Rupert, and me, and to be fair, because we can actually talk about it sensibly rather than with the most ridiculous nonsense. Rupert Darwell, author of The Green Tyranny, thank you very much indeed. We will no doubt will be seeing, all of the weeping and the wailing and the, we've only got 5 minutes to save the earth, sort of Flash Gordon type stuff that they'll do at the next Brazil COP30, I guess it is. Absolutely ridiculous. Totally mad. Brian Worthing says, morning, Mike. The BBC should be a subscription channel. If I want to watch Netflix, I have to pay for it. I am, however, forced to pay for the garbage that the BBC spew out. If it was a subscription channel, it would go down the toilet where it belongs. They certainly wouldn't be able to cover Glastonbury in the way that they do, sending 500 people down there. They wouldn't be able to employ 500 people. Rob says, I'm not against a disability bill. Savings should be made where practical, but this is a confidence vote in Keir Starmer, and I'm fully in support of that. Presumably not fully in support, though, of actually what Keir Starmer says. Derek in Newhall in Derbyshire says this, morning, Mike. On the companies allowing illegals to work for them, there are already laws and fines in place for the authorities to implement. So my question is, why are they being allowed to get away with it? And especially as two-tier Keir is so up on law and order, he is purposely avoiding the implementation of the laws in place because it does not work to his advantage. True. Let's get a voice note from Andy.
Morning, Mike. It's Andy from Birmingham. Hope you're well, bud. Do you know, every time you turn the radio on and listen to your good selves and whatever, you just shake your head in the morning. There must be thousands and thousands of people shaking their heads. What Prime Minister of the UK would admit to not reading a speech because his head was somewhere else doing something else? We're not the Democratic Republic of Congo, with all respect to them. And people probably look to us, the UK, as being sort of one of the mild-mannered, dominant forces in the world. Not known more, mate. It's embarrassing. Got to get him out. I mean, I don't know who'll come up after him, but I think he's toast. Listening to like some of your guests this morning, I think he's toast. And the other one is, well, when will the year anniversary gaslighting start on social media and the media? When all the MPs come on, Starmer lying and gaslighting, Reeves lying and gaslighting. Great show, bud. Keep it up. Ta-da.
That's a very good point, and thank you, Andy, for that. You've just reminded me to check out the first lie of the day from Keir Starmer, and I've just now done it, because his first tweet has come out 11 minutes ago, and here it is. I know how hard it is for new parents juggling childcare and work. Right now, 1 in 3 dads don't take paternity leave because they can't afford it. That's just not fair. My government is launching a full review of our parental leave system to deliver for working parents. So he's launching a review. Wow. What does that mean? Does it mean somebody's going to look into it and then report back? Yes. How is that delivering for working parents exactly? Who's writing this rubbish? Seriously. Morning, Mike. Great show. Just wanted to say I'm 64 years old and I've given up on this country now. I know you're still fighting the fight, but I give up, says Ray from Huntington. Ray, listen, I feel your pain. Don't give up completely, though. There's still hope. There is still hope. We get Starmer out and then we can start again. And I know you'll say, well, with whom? Well, we'll see. Can't be any worse than him, surely. I feel like we've said that before. 8:52.
in modern policing, there is a complete lack of common sense. Common sense is good. There is no good judgment anymore. Somebody can come in, give a theatrical performance, say my feelings are hurt, and the police will investigate. So the police can actually be used as a vexatious tool to silence people, because if you come in, it's very much on your emotions and your feelings and your impact statement, and you can talk a load of BS, but if you can give a convincing performance, the police will come out and investigate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Of course, this is the home of common sense. It's where the nation comes to talk. A great show, says Ian. He says a good place to look for savings would be Motability. I heard yesterday 20% of new car registrations are now for this. Where I live, a couple with a disabled child were given a transit-sized brand new vehicle. The ridiculous part was nobody in the house had a driving licence, and I only ever saw it used when Auntie arrived to drive it to very large quantities of bottled water from Costco. Yeah, I mean, we talked about Motability. Do you remember there was a big scandal some months ago, probably now, and Motability was very much put under the microscope, and it turned out that so much of the car business now is involved in Motability, and I think it's also now, is it not, co-owned by a bunch of the banks, because it makes so much money, because so many people get these cars. Some of them are legitimate, many of them are not. And that is the problem. Alan in Merseyside says, people keep saying a black hole, which seems to be making reference to the so-called 22 million left by the Tories. So let's now rephrase this from now on to say Labour's black hole. Well, I think so, because it's now got an awful lot bigger. We're going to talk to some callers in a moment. Let's go back to the Starmer archive, though, because, of course, we are getting closer, ever closer, to July the 4th, the one-year anniversary of the Keir Starmer government. Here's his phone call with President Trump.
I'd like to introduce him now to say a few words. Mr. Prime Minister, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. President, Donald. And this is a really fantastic, historic day in which we can announce this deal between our two great countries.
Yeah, it turned out they couldn't actually announce the deal between these two great countries because it wasn't actually done yet. They only just did it recently, and the end result seems to be that we bought a load of planes from America at a cost of about £88 million each, some warplanes, and also apparently the trade deal's now at risk because the British government wants to put advertising bans on alcohol. So you can't advertise alcohol. The Americans are saying, hang on a minute, we want to advertise our alcohol in your country. So if you do that, the trade deal is off. So that's where we are now. Let's talk to Rosalind, who's in the Lake District. Rosalind, very good morning to you.
Oh, good morning, Mike.
Thanks for calling. What have you got for me?
Mike, I wanted to call you because I don't think many people my generation, I'm 69 years old now, and it's not about me. It's about something that I don't think anybody's talking about. The country is in such a bad way that it's happening now. We're losing valuable, educated talent from this country. My son, who has spent his life working, he's 40 now. He had gas-registered business, he had building business. His wife is a senior social worker. They've come back and told me they are emigrating. They're off to Australia. But the thing is, Mike, they've got so many friends who've already gone to Australia and New Zealand. And there's a network going. These people aren't stupid. I mean, I work 2 jobs 7 days a week to get my kids through. They're not stupid. There's a whole network. Friends, family over there, they get stuff sent back. This is how much it costs to live here. Come here, you'll have a better way of life. My daughter-in-law, who's a senior social worker, she can be out there 10 o'clock at night sometimes sorting out problems. No, they've had enough. I've got a friend whose daughter decided she wasn't going to be able to walk anymore, bought herself a wheelchair, wants to be at home and have children, lives off of benefit. My son and daughter-in-law and their friends and families are seeing that they're paying for all this.
Yeah.
And where they live, it's not safe for them anymore. They've got children, 8 to 10, 12 years old. They don't want this life. They feel like they're banging their heads against a wall. I'm so angry with what this country's doing. And make no mistake, Mike, it's not just them. I go to groups. I have a lot of friends.
Yeah.
So many of us, sons, daughters, grandchildren, they don't come back, Mike.
Yeah.
And these are people that are doing jobs that are skilled. We need them.
Yeah, we need, absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, this happened in the 80s as well, when people just decided to try and, find a better way to live. And they did. And, of course, Rosalind, I mean, as much as it pains you, I'm sure, to see your children travelling so far away, they don't come back. And it's a massive loss. And this is the problem. The welfare state in this country is responsible for an awful lot of people being particularly cheesed off with the way that they're forced to live. They want to pay for everybody who doesn't want to pay for anything. It's shocking. And this Labour government isn't going to fix it. We'll be back after the news.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Jonathan Reynolds is doing the rounds today. He's not coming on this show, though. He's busy making a fool of himself on other shows. Imagine what it would be like if he came on here. He doesn't know what he's talking about most of the time. This is a bloke who pretended he was a solicitor for the best part of 10 years. He never was, of course. Coming up this hour, we're going to speak to Helen Whately MP, Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. Annabel Denham is here as well, Deputy Comment Editor for The Telegraph. We'll be picking up on what is going on in the welfare bill changes, because it looks as though Keir Starmer is not yet out of the woods. The front page of the Daily Mail says rebel MPs are set to humiliate the Prime Minister today. Just a few days short of the commemoration of his first year in power, the first year of government for Keir Starmer and Labour, which we are categorising here in Talk as 10 years, 12 months of absolute chaos, by the way. Can you imagine 10 years of it? Starmer's benefit deal with the rebels is unravelled, according to the Daily Telegraph. And the Times says there's absolutely no chance of a Starmer keeping faith with the Labour rebels. They've accused him of breaking his welfare promises. Basically, what is happening now is that instead of saving £5 billion on welfare, they're only going to save about £500 million, and all they're going to do is upset a load of people. So the question now being asked, is this even worth going through all this pain to try and get a welfare bill through, which is not worth the paper that it is written on? Savings are not going to be made. But the question I've got for you is that surely Labour have got this completely wrong, because the backbenchers who say they don't want any changes to the welfare bill because they want to protect the people who get all these PIP payments, surely the PIP payments are the problem. You know, we can't afford them. There are so many people who are getting them and wasting our money. You know, forget about the woman that you've heard on the news already who said, oh, well, I don't get a free bus pass anymore, so I need to have free taxis to take me everywhere I go, so that's why I need the PIP payments. Well, sorry, we're not supposed to be paying for people's free taxis unless they're somehow incapacitated. Even then, I'm not sure we should be doing it. Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves says she's going to slash the ISA tax allowance so that if you were trying to do quite well for yourself, if you were trying to get ahead in life and put some money away for a rainy day, you used to be able to have a £20,000 tax allowance in order to do so. She's going to slash that to £5,000, which again is a completely stupid, unworkable thing to do. BBC still very much at the forefront of the conversation this morning as well. It turns out that Tim Davie, who is of course the Director General of the BBC, was not only all sure of what was going out on the BBC's network at the weekend from Glastonbury, he was actually at Glastonbury himself. Apparently seeing the employees of the BBC, 500 of them, who had all gone down there for a massive jolly, supposedly working. He apparently was consulted. He did say that the offending pieces of film, like, for example, whether it was voice notes that were going out, whether it was, in fact, the BBC's Ed, what was his name? Bob Villan. If it was him, that shouldn't go out on a live stream, and it shouldn't go out in any way, shape or form, but it did anyway. And Lisa Nandy asked him to stop it, and it didn't happen. Absolutely incredible stuff. It's 7 minutes past 9. Let's talk to Helen Whately, who's Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. Helen, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. This welfare bill seems to be causing a bit of trouble for Keir Starmer. He's tried to make all sorts of concessions, hasn't he? But he hasn't really made enough concessions, it turns out. And so now he's going to be humiliated whichever way round it goes.
Well, Keir Starmer's government is in chaos over this welfare bill. They introduced a bill that was rushed, it was unambitious, it wasn't even going to fix the problem of the welfare system. It was only going to save £5 billion out of a budget that's forecast to go up to £100 billion by the end of this decade. He's now made concessions to his rebels, which has halved the savings. It's also made the legislation worse. I mean, it really is a shocking situation for a government to be in with such a large majority and that had all their time in opposition to come up with a plan to reform welfare.
How have they managed to make such a mess of it, though? Because, I mean, clearly there are problems with the PIP system. You know, many of them seem to have emanated from the Tory government's time in office, and many of them seem to have emanated from the time of COVID. But we heard a woman on the news just now, and without wishing to pick on her in particular, she's talking about having her PIP, which pays for her mental health therapy. She also has PIP, which pays for free taxis for her because she doesn't get a free bus pass anymore. I mean, surely there are too many people in this country getting too much free stuff. Isn't that the problem?
Well, yeah, the welfare system and particularly the sickness benefit bit simply isn't working. We're seeing around 3,000 people a day go onto sickness benefits. That's gone up while Labour has been in government. We know that particularly the rise started happening, yes, when we were in government coming through the pandemic. We had reforms in place to bring it back down, but Labour came in and they either paused or cancelled those reforms. Now, if they had their own plan, that might have been all very well, but what's quite clear from this fiasco going on with the welfare bill, that they didn't have their own plan. That's one reason why it's not getting support from their side, and of course not getting support from our side either. What we have done is we said to Keir Starmer, if you can fix this, if you can come forward with proper savings to bring that bill down, if you can come forward with plans to get more people into work and then commit that you will use those savings to avoid putting up taxes in the autumn, then you'd have our support. And we've also given him suggestions of how he can do that, but he hasn't taken us up on that. He's just folded to his rebels.
Yeah, and so are you of the opinion that the bill will go through tonight, or that they might even pull it at the last minute? Because, I mean, there's word that the number of rebels might be bigger than 50, might even be as many as 80, which, of course, would then defeat the bill.
Well, we'll see what happens, and this is clearly up to government whips to make sure they can get their legislation through. I said it's extraordinary with such a huge majority that they can't get something through Parliament. And that's one of the things that makes this actually so serious, is that we've got a situation where Rachel Reeves put up taxes and killed growth in the economy. She's gone on a spending spree. She desperately needs to get public spending under control, but she can't even get, couldn't even get 5 billion and potentially not 2.5 billion of savings through Parliament. Done a U-turn on this, did a U-turn on the winter fuel payment. So how is she going to balance the books? I mean, it looks like more borrowing or tax rises are inevitable. That's terrible for our country, terrible for the economy. And meanwhile, we've got a Prime Minister who also doesn't have control of his MPs. He can't make the difficult decisions that you have to make in government. In essence, just 1 year into being Prime Minister, he's already a lame duck Prime Minister. Yeah, it would seem so. Many people don't seem to think he's going to last out the year, to be honest. What about Tim Davie? Do you think he should last out the year? He's getting an awful lot of criticism this morning. He was actually down at Glastonbury at the weekend when all of the hateful chants were being made, death to the IDF, and from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, etc., etc., etc. This character, Bob Villan, who apparently has been on the scene for quite some time, has been on the BBC for nigh on sort of 17, 18 years, with, on and off. Yeah, well, I mean, clearly the Director General of the BBC has questions to answer about, why on earth was this broadcast in the first place? Why didn't they pull the live stream at Glastonbury? If it turns out he was there, what was his role in the decision not to do that? He's got to come up with the answers on that. They've got to fix what appears to be a long-running problem of anti-Semitism within the BBC. For instance, we saw that they refused to call Hamas terrorists, and this is a real concern, and so they've got questions to answer. Yeah. But, I mean, he's been through so many scandals, whether it's Gary Lineker, whether it's Hugh Edwards, whether it's the bias about Hamas, whether it's about the way that they report the situation in Gaza, whether it's now about hate speech at Glastonbury. I mean, how many lives does this guy have? Shouldn't he go? Well, as I said, he's got some serious questions to answer, and we need to see the BBC providing, high-quality, impartial journalism, and it's been clearly going in the wrong direction on that in recent times. Well, they're just not providing that, are they? That's the problem. Well, yeah, as I say, there seems to be a strong thread of anti-Semitism in some of their broadcasting. So the problem with refusing to call Hamas terrorists, even after that awful attack on Israel. I mean, yes, I like anybody else seeing innocent women and children in Gaza being killed, hate to see that, but we know Hamas use them as human shields and are fundamentally a terrorist organisation. Yep, they are. Helen, thanks for talking to us. Helen Waitley, MP, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. How about this from Ruth in Fife, listening to what Keir Starmer was saying about fixing the foundations. You might remember that clip that we played earlier of him talking about how to fix the damp in the wall. She goes, what's this gumbo going on about? Drying the wall with a hairdryer? We've all done it, he said. Well, no, I haven't. I couldn't afford the electric for starters. I think most people haven't used a hairdryer to dry the wall in their house, to be honest. Keir Starmer and probably Rachel Reeves will most likely be gone before 2026, but look who's waiting in the wings to take over. Angela Rayner, says Roger in Hounslow. Help! Let's talk to Annabel Denham, Deputy Comment Editor for The Telegraph. Annabel, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
The business of government goes from bad to worse. They've got a couple of days left until we all can celebrate 1 year of the Keir Starmer government, but there isn't really very much to celebrate, it seems to me.
No, Mike, that's right. I wrote a column earlier this week just looking at what Labour have done to the economy and the fact that virtually every data point has gone south since they came into power. If you look at things like our employment rate and our unemployment rate, if you look at what's happening with inflation, growth has obviously been downgraded in almost every forecast. You even had Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, pouring cold water on this idea that somehow the economy is recovering. So everything is bad, but I fear it's going to get much worse. And, you know, when it comes to the vote today, the second reading of the Universal Credit and PIP bill, this could have been a really defining moment, not just for the Starmer administration, but for Britain as a whole. It could have been the moment when we actually began to address the problem of our mushrooming welfare bill. And yet it looks like, well, it's been watered down significantly already. And it looks like we could have the very unusual situation where Starmer is in fact defeated. And I would just take issue, if I may, Mike, with some of the comments by your previous guest, Helen Whately. Yeah. You know, the Tories are playing silly games here. They're prioritising a defeat for Keir Starmer early during this Parliament over what is best for the UK economy. You know, they're setting demands that they know Labour won't be able to meet, least of all in the time frame. And cutting welfare is absolutely the right thing to do. We can't have hundreds of thousands of people who are out of work on benefits for issues like musculoskeletal problems and mental health problems. You know, these are in many cases people who could work but are choosing not to. And this bill was an opportunity to address that and also to cut government spending by £5 billion, which may sound like a drop in the ocean, but we've got to start making some savings somewhere. Yeah, exactly right. They have to start making some drops in the ocean to stop the drain that's going out the other end, where it's all just like, you know, just being pumped out into the sea. Because at the moment, there's clearly very, very many people who are on this PIP qualification who have not really had to do very much to get the money. You know, we just heard, I keep mentioning this one woman who we heard on the news who says that she gets the PIP money in order to pay for taxes. I think we've got the clip. Have we have it?
I use it to pay for my private mental health therapy. In addition, it goes to having to pay for taxis to get everywhere. Even if I live close by, I have to taxi everywhere because I don't get a free bus pass because they've tightened the regulations for that up.
So she's got private mental health care, which is, you know, fine, but why am I paying for it? She gets no free bus pass anymore, so now she gets a free taxi. I don't understand why people live this kind of, you know, entitled life where they think we who are doing okay for money have to pay for everybody else who doesn't fancy working.
No, exactly. I mean, there are too many people in this country who seem to think that somebody else will foot the bill, and, you know, they can live a life on benefits being supported by other taxpayers. And, you know, unfortunately, it's simply unsustainable, not least with the demographic crisis and our shrinking worker to grey ratio. But part of the problem here, Mike, of course, is you've got so many Labour MPs who are sniffily saying they didn't come into politics to cut benefits. But, you know, if they're not going to cut benefits, then they're going to have to find savings elsewhere, because Rachel Reeves has got her ironclad fiscal rules. She won't be able to borrow very much more money. OK, she's going to increase taxes almost certainly at the October budget, having promised that she wouldn't. But, you know, we are at or close to our taxable limit. So where is the money going to come from? To support all of these people? And, you know, a big problem with PIP is the fact that it was introduced in 2012 under the coalition government, and it was more generous than out-of-work benefits. So you immediately created incentives for people to not just be out of work or looking for a job, but actually to be claiming that they were unfit to work, they were too well to work, because the benefits they would receive would be more generous. And then we're surprised when there's an absolute explosion in the number of people who are being signed on to this. With no end in sight. It seems a typical example of the way that this government and previous governments don't seem to understand the way that human nature works. You know, if you start telling people, you know, because you want to make it politically expedient to move them off an unemployment list onto a different list, which is kind of what happened. They wanted to make it look like there were fewer people unemployed. When you say to people, we'll give you more money and more of an incentive to just say that you're ill rather than that you're unemployed, you can't work,
why did they not see that this would happen? That, millions and millions of people would suddenly go, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I'll just say that I've got mental health problems, or, I need a free taxi to get me to everywhere I go because I've got, some kind of fear of buses. I don't know. I mean, there seems to be an awful lot of people who are getting an awful lot of subsidy to do absolutely nothing.
No, and politicians are doing this all while chanting the refrain that it's very important to make work pay. Well, Mike, unfortunately in Britain today, it doesn't pay to work in some circumstances, which is why you had a businessman in front of the Lords Economic Committee a few weeks ago saying there are some Gen Z, some young people who are refusing to get a job that pays less than £40,000.
Yeah.
We a totally perverse, warped incentive structure here. And it isn't just the generosity of our benefits system, but it's also how, people feel penalised by the tax system, which is overly complex. It's got far too many cliff edges, which stop people from wanting to work or from wanting to work more, get promotions or pay rises. The entire thing is completely broken. And, the Tories for 14 years did little more than tinker, and Labour are just simply going to make it much worse.
I mean, indeed. Just one final thing. I know you've been writing this week in the Telegraph, but the story this week that was in the Telegraph as well about migrants mocking the UK. The guy in the front of a dinghy with about 60 people on it, all men, with his telephone, holding it up, taking a selfie of him and all his mates coming to Britain. It's unbelievable.
It is, you just can't believe your eyes when you see it, really. I think Britain has turned itself into a laughingstock. The idea that Labour came in and said they were going to get really tough, they were going to smash the gangs, now looks ridiculous. These are supposed to be, according to the narrative, the world's most sort of desperate people who are fleeing war-torn countries and persecution. And there they are, sort of having a jolly old time and taking selfies of themselves as they illegally come onto British shores. We've had record numbers of people coming over under this Labour administration. That won't have been helped by Yvette Cooper a few weeks ago saying that it's only a matter of time before Labour gets even tougher. And she even set a target for that, which presumably would have meant even more people trying to come in a shorter space of time. Then we had that one in, one out wheeze with France announced last week, but we've already punted £500 million to the French and have very little to show for it. So there's one way that we stop the boats, and that is by smashing demand, not smashing the supply side, and Labour is simply unwilling to do that.
Yeah, exactly right. Annabelle, great to speak to you. Thanks very much indeed. We've got to run. Annabelle Denham, Deputy Commentator for The Telegraph there, writing this week in the paper, as she does every week, of course, as well. Coming up next, Peter Lamb joins us, Labour MP for Crawley. He's one of the Labour rebels. He's called the welfare cuts deeply uncomfortable. We'll find out why, coming next.
Every year Glastonbury gets worse and worse, more vile, more disgusting. Every so many months we have this debate about the BBC and what they are and aren't broadcasting, and how it lacks any form of political neutrality or independence. This has turned the dial again. We need to go back again. We need to have a national debate again about the state of the BBC, and we probably need to put it out of its misery.
Oh, very interesting. So you think it's time for the BBC to be unfunded?
I think we need to look at it again. I think this has brought things to another new low bar for the BBC.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer here just before that. Right now, we're going to speak, though, to Peter Lamb, who's Labour MP for Crawley. He's called the welfare cuts that are coming up in this welfare bill deeply uncomfortable. The welfare bill gets a vote later on today, probably early evening, I suppose, in the House of Commons. He's one of the rebels. I don't know whether he's still a rebel. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. You've called the welfare cuts deeply uncomfortable. Was that before the concessions? Does it still apply now?
Well, I mean, the concessions are important insofar as the last time that we had welfare reform, there was quite a sharp uptake in people taking their own lives because they couldn't work out how they would make ends meet without the benefits. So it's very important that anyone who is currently in receipt of PIP knows that their current PIP is protected on the current rating. However, we will end up with a system where there is lower levels of support for people who have what is, by the criteria, quite a high level of need. And that certainly doesn't run in line with my belief system.
So, as far as you're concerned, you're still not happy with the bill as it stands?
Look, I completely accept that there's a need to deal with the rising costs of social security. I completely accept that we need to try and do something to get people back into work. Work is beneficial for people on a range of different levels, in addition to, of course, being beneficial for the economy and the taxpayer. My problem with this is I think there are better alternatives available that just simply haven't been looked at. Why do we have a situation where half the bill is going to be made up with people with mental health issues? You know, when in my neck of the woods, you've got one practitioner for every 13,000 awaiting assessment. Every one of those people can go to their GP and sign up for PIP tomorrow. But you'll find that when it comes down to actually getting the support you need to do something about it, you'll be on a list where you're unlikely to get help this year, next year, possibly not this decade. And all that time you're claiming PIP. Let's fix that system, and in the process, let's get the country's balance of payments back into track.
Yeah, but isn't that going to cost even more money to do that? If you need to have more people available to do assessments, where do they come from?
Well, you do up front need to put more money in. That is perfectly true. But when it comes down to dealing with a backlog, just like with the NHS in other areas, by year 5, by having dealt with the backlog, you're back in line with reducing expenditure. So you're keeping with the fiscal rules. There's no reason with the fiscal rules why you couldn't do this. In terms of where the people come from, exactly the same as with physical health. You try and look to people in the current private system. You bring those people in temporarily. You use the IPT system that was brought into place under the last government to recruit more people into the system, a short-term boost, and that enables us to deal with the backlog.
Do you think there are some people, or do you accept that there are some people on benefits that don't need them?
It's possible. Look, I think actually the reality is you could create the most stringent system on the planet. There will be one or two people who work out a way to game it. The question is whether or not we shouldn't have any support at all because some people game the system. And I think that if you're a disabled person who's incapable of washing yourself, dressing yourself, feeding yourself, the fact that one or two people game the system wouldn't give you any comfort if you were left there to rot.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, there's clearly other cases. I mean, we've heard from a woman today who says that because she doesn't get a free bus pass anymore, she applied for PIP so that she could get money to pay for taxis to take her to places. I don't know what her circumstances are, but presumably if she can get on a bus, then she's not completely disabled to the point where she can't travel. And you wonder whether there's so many cases like that where people have become, I don't know, dependent on the system, where the system was originally intended to help them to get into work, but instead it's helped them to not get into work.
Well, I think what you've highlighted there is when you make small savings in one place, it can come back in much bigger places as costs to the public sector. And that's exactly what we suspect will happen here. Once you've removed the ability to give small amounts of money to people to help take care of themselves, the burden of that is ultimately going to fall on Social Security at much, much higher costs to local taxpayers.
And what about your current situation then? I mean, as far as you are aware, we're told there's about 50 rebels still who won't vote with the bill. Are you in that camp?
I am in that camp. I reject the name rebel. I'm standing up for my constituents and I'm standing up for the values of my party.
OK. Well, it's not me calling you a rebel, it's the Labour Party that's calling you a rebel. Do you think there might be others? Do you think the number could increase between now and the time the vote comes?
The interesting question, and certainly yesterday it looked as if the Select Committee chairs were increasingly uncomfortable with the compromise that it reached looking like it had actually been turned back on. There were elements of what was being presented which was not in the deal that they'd agreed to at the end of last week. It could very well be that there are greater numbers out there that haven't currently got down to oppose, who are going to oppose, but also, you know, you've got to bear in mind there might be a much, much greater number who abstain. And if you get 60 people to abstain, then that 50-odd people starts being enough to overturn the bill.
Interesting. And how would you describe, in one word, the first year of Keir Starmer's prime ministership?
2 words, teething problems. But, you know, we're getting there.
You're getting where?
We're getting to a situation where we're starting to make some headway on the missions. The whole thing about having a mission-led government as opposed to just having some short-term goals is that they take a long time to deliver. And these are all big things. They're things the country has to resolve if we're going to deliver a future that's really worth living in this country. It takes time. You know, trying to build 1.5 million houses is an enormous target, for instance. Trying to deal with the economic situation by ourselves is incredibly challenging, even though we are already managing to outperform other G7 countries. It is a lot of effort. It is a very difficult time period to be in, and I don't think there's any shame in admitting that.
No, I couldn't agree more. Peter, thank you very much indeed. Peter Lamb, Labour MP for Crawley, doesn't want to be called a rebel, but is one. Is not going to vote with the government tonight and says there might be enough people who actually vote the bill down. Which would make it a very miserable first anniversary indeed for Keir Starmer. Let's get a voice note from Dave.
Morning, Mike. Dave at Manchester. Absolutely fantastic news. When you jumped on that migrant story about the Deliveroo, etc., other food companies are available story, and then you hammered it all week, and now something's actually been done about it, you guys have probably triggered something there that the government haven't been bothered to do for months or years. So it's fantastic, mate. Keep it up. Dave at Manchester.
Dave, thank you very much indeed. Great credit to the Sun, of course, who were the ones that did all the hard work on this. They did all the digging. They did all the sending out of reporters to find out exactly how this was all happening. And a lot of it started, I have to say, because we picked up on a couple of early videos some months ago of some migrant hotels where people were talking in the sort of lobby of the migrant hotels, and suddenly you saw in the background a guy jumping on an Uber Eats bike and just cycling out. And people were sort of going, what's he doing? How is he doing that? And that's kind of where it all started. Great show, Mike. We might as well save money and get rid of all our police and border forces. The Sun newspaper seems to be able to seek out crime and issues with illegal migrants, says Joe from Norfolk. Absolutely right. This from Carl in the Derbyshire Dales. If you score more than 8 points on PIP, you are entitled to a disability bus pass, sometimes called a gold card. You're also entitled to it if you cannot drive on medical grounds. See, there's all this stuff that nobody... I mean, I wouldn't even know about this stuff. Instead of a bus pass or a taxi, why can't that girl walk? I have to, says Sarah. And Mike, am I the only one that's picked up on the fact that the woman talks about getting a taxi to her private mental health therapy, says Andrew from Perth in Scotland? Well, there is an awful lot of this free stuff going around, it seems to me. It doesn't seem to be right, does it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. We've got loads more going on. Major breaking news, of course. High street brand Clark's Shoes cuts 1,200 jobs as sales fall by nearly £100 million. The firm is blaming challenging market conditions. That comes on top of Nissan announcing late last night that they're going to lose at least 250, maybe 300 jobs up in their Sunderland plant because of the slowdown in the purchasing of, guess what? Electric vehicles. That's right. People still don't want them. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Rupert Bell. He is, of course, our man down at Wimbledon, but he's also going to talk about the King, because the Royal Train's being axed, according to our sources, and also on the front page of the Daily Mail, what the Queen really thought about Meghan. Sensation revealed by her own beloved cousin. We'll ask him about that too. Big day for the Brits in Wimbledon too. It's 9:33.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:35. I'm Mike Graham. Good morning, Mike. That woman says she can't afford to pay for taxis to take her to her mental health therapy, and she doesn't qualify for a bus pass. Doesn't she know that buses are cheaper than taxis? God help us if she's typical of people in this country, says Chris in Ottershaw. Let's have a word with Dean on Labour.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always, mate. Well, to sum up Starmer's first year as Prime Minister, it's just been a catastrophe. From every decision he has made, he's either U-turned on it or made a complete hash of it. From locking up people in this country for nasty tweets, to smashing the gangs, the guy couldn't even smash an egg, to we're going to make the economy better, it's got worse. We're going to make your cost of living easier, it's got worse. Everything this guy turns his hand to just turns to dust. He is literally the worst Prime Minister leading the worst government at the worst time in history to be doing it. It's an absolute disgrace that these people have got into power. Partly the Tories' fault for the mess they made, but I just cannot see Labour getting back in power for another 14 years come the next election. They are a complete disaster.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, Dean. I mean, in fact, those are my very words on the show that we're going to be putting out on Friday. It's a Talk special. I don't know if we should have a look at it now, should we? Have we got time? Go on, let's have a look.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Don't miss it. It has been a year of chaos, but thankfully Rupert Bell's here, Talk's royal correspondent, our man at Wimbledon, of course, every day as well. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, have you ever been on the royal train?
No, I did once have. The only thing I have done is I did before Britannia was decommissioned. I did have dinner on Britannia once because a cousin of mine was serving on it. So I had the privilege of that was back in the early 80s. That now is up in Scotland.
It's in Leith, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of the most visited tourist attractions in Edinburgh.
Right.
And talking of the royal train. They are now looking for a home to where to base that, because I am sure it would be a hugely popular tourist attraction wherever it should go. And that is because they say it's not really something that works in the modern royal family. For instance, the Princess Royal, you often see getting on the train at Kemble, near where she lives in Gloucestershire. If she's up to London, there's nothing unusual about her just commuting up to London to go to the palace. It's quite normal. So it doesn't get used a lot. It's expensive to maintain. So it's sad when you think, from a historical point of view, when it was first brought in Queen Victoria's reign. Obviously, it's evolved in the years. But we remember when the King George V died, his body was brought on the royal train from Sandringham. The late Queen absolutely adored it and enjoyed being on it whenever she would go around the country. But the King has rarely used it. I think he slept on it maybe once this year when he was doing some work for the Duchy of Lancaster. So maybe its time has come and it's going to be decommissioned in 2027, because to produce a new one would be expensive when the royal family are obviously having to put their funds very much in the spotlight in terms of what they're doing with the grant they get from the government.
Well, Peter Blexley was with me this morning, and he said, why not make it into a sort of an attraction which you could go on, like almost the Orient Express. You could have a sort of luxury royal train organised trips all the way up to sort of beautiful parts of Scotland, beautiful parts of the West Country, down to Cornwall. I don't know. Would that be something they could do with it, or would they have to hive it off to a private operator for that?
Well, I don't know how many bedrooms are, but I suppose Jeff Bezos could have probably had his wedding on it. He might have been able to afford it. I don't know.
Right.
I think that's what role it will have. It might become, in a museum, and you can probably have a restaurant there, than the sort of where the King and Queen used to eat, that sort of thing.
Right.
I'm sure that, it could be something that would be quite attractive, because obviously it's beautifully decorated inside. Back in 1977, there were 2 new carriages built to celebrate for the late Queen her Silver Jubilee back then, and it was used regularly. And I think the Prince and Princess of Wales used it in 2020 when they went on a tour of the country to thank various NHS staff through the COVID pandemic. So it has been used, but actually increasingly not. And so it really its time has come to an end.
Yeah.
And if the King was probably trying to use it today, probably the rails would heat, and so they'd be stuck in some sort of siding somewhere. But anyway, I digress.
As somebody described it, as it's the only train in Britain that actually runs on time. Which I can absolutely verify. Of course, it's called Progress, isn't it, Rupert? You wouldn't be defending anybody who wanted to keep it, surely?
Yeah, so you'll pop at me for yesterday, the line judges, Mike.
Just looking for a bit of consistency, that's all.
Was it? I didn't say I think probably its time has run course. It is progress. Is that your attempt at coming back with a good first serve there, and to give a Wimbledon analogy?
It sort of is, yeah. It sort of is. I rather enjoyed actually first day of Wimbledon yesterday, because I was at home because it was so hot, and I watched a bit of Alcaraz. It was quite a remarkable game, but we'll come back to that in a minute. What about the front page of the Mail today? What the Queen really thought about Meghan. An extraordinary book has come out in which there's been a sort of report of a conversation, or several conversations that took place between Queen Elizabeth II and Harry, but also Lady Elizabeth Anson, who's apparently confided to Sally Bedell-Smith in a new book.
Yes, basically saying that the Queen wasn't convinced that Meghan loved Harry, and that Harry was sort of implying that was not extremely bright and a bit soft.
Yes.
And bowing to besotted. So you actually end up, I think we all got the feeling that that's exactly what's happened. And it still seems to be the feeling right now that Harry has no way of dealing with Meghan. And today Meghan's launching a bottle of her rosé brand.
Yes.
And on the day that would have been Princess Diana's birthday. So interesting. That is an interesting take. But obviously it does suggest that the Queen lost patience with Meghan pretty early on and did not trust her motives. There were a lot of people saying at the time, pause, pause, pause. We don't need to rush into a wedding, but Harry was insistent and off it, and probably, maybe to some extent, may have been goaded into it by a then future wife. So, and obviously she is still relishing being the Duchess of Sussex and using it any way which she can to exploit her non-affiliation with the royal family, if you see what I mean.
Yes, and still questions that they're asking about whether they can continue using the titles for their children, which seems to be a bit of a problem at the moment.
Well, I don't understand. They live in America now. This is where I just don't get it, because HRH, you've lived in America a lot. Yeah. They don't, it's not a country, once they severed links with the British back in whenever it was, 17, whatever it was, they got rid of all titles. Yeah, got rid of all titles. So, this is where I don't understand. So these poor children are going to school with HRH titles, and it's irrelevant now in America. So those children being brought up in America should be treated as American children. As she is the mother, an American, has every right, if she's moved there, then bring them up in the way that she wants, rather than these poor children still having that HRH moniker attached to their name.
Yeah, absolutely right. Wimbledon, let's just touch on that before I let you go. A big day yesterday, opened with a grand style, I guess. I mean, I watched it, and I kept occasionally hearing somebody shouting, out. But I don't know who that was, because I was watching, as I say, a couple of the different games, and you'd occasionally hear it. So who was shouting out?
Well, it might have been the umpire, you see, because puts up a hand to say, or like that. Yeah. So there's two, and might have also been doing that. Very rare. I think one of the things, it has been going on the ATP Tour and the WTA Tour all year, but bearing in mind, people who come to Wimbledon are not won't be watching tennis every week of the year. So for many, it would have been their first experience of Wimbledon in the new era, as it were. Right. So it takes a bit of time to adjusting. And, the sort of picture of centre court looked very different without the line judges.
Yeah, it wasn't as good, was it?
Well, change, Mike.
It wasn't
change, Mike. Now, we were talking about it last night, one or two of us. Yeah. I must admit, I did find it a bit soulless. And as I walked down to the ground, there were a couple of line judges saying AI has taken away our livelihood. But the Wimbledon have said that they still are using people in capacity, because there's still people behind the scenes helping, organising things like the ball changes. That has to be overseen, which would have been part of the line judge's role. So there are
you still want to know, but I still want to know who's calling out, because I heard it quite a few times.
Yeah, but it may be just the umpire just sort of adding his penny's worth. I mean, I heard it as well. So it's evolving.
But does that mean that the umpire is sort of registering his or her kind of, displeasure by actually doing what the line judges used to do?
No, basically the umpire has the computer in front of him, and obviously the umpire can see from his chair, but also he's looking down at his or her screen to confirm whether that ball is in and out. Yeah. And also it might be that the umpire will shout out during a rally because it might be a close call, but that is also the umpire then going out to confirm. It's all right when the point ends, you don't need to. Right. But if it's midway through a rally and that looks very close,
but he can still get that wrong though, because he's not doing it through Hawkeye. He's doing it through his own judgment, right?
No, but Hawkeye will tell him at all times.
What, even live in the moment?
In the moment, Hawkeye is telling him what's going on.
Okay, all right. So if he calls out, then it's definitely out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
All right. So good day for Britain though yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, Sonny Cartel, that was a good win against Ostapenko. Katie Boulter putting out the number 9 seed. That was a great victory. Emma Raducanu putting out her fellow Brit Mimi Zhu. So that was really good on the women's front. Obviously, Cam Norrie coming through. Tave, this prodigy going through the US collegiate system. I mean, he's won £66,000. He can't actually keep the prize money because the collegiate system won't allow him.
Yeah, where does that go then?
Well, it goes to the college, but as he said, he can put in some giant expense bills for flying out coaches and his entourage. So it will help him, but he's obviously a talented player. So and I think it now means that if he's a second round loser, he will walk away with £99,000.
Not bad, is it?
It's not bad for well, could be 6, 7, 8 hours work, but you know, it's a long road. So the wild cards it was good for. You know, there was Arthur Ferry putting out Pop Around. That was a good win as well. So there were some very encouraging performances. And obviously Jack Draper, the number 4 seed for Britain, he starts his quest later on today. So hopefully there will be more and continued British success, because yesterday was a very good start to proceedings from a British perspective.
Absolutely. Rupert, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Rupert Bell talks, royal correspondent there, with a bit of tennis thrown in at the end down at Wimbledon. Royals will be, of course, in attendance, no doubt, in the coming days and weeks. So a quick voice note from Jamie.
Mike, what are you doing? It's Tuesday morning and you've already ruined the rest of my week. Some girl that needs the government to pay for their mental health therapy, and because the government will not give her free bus passes, she then needs the government to pay for her taxis. I'm on my way to work to earn money, to provide for me and my family, to contribute to society, to pay my way, and you're sending me this. Thanks a lot.
I'm sorry, Jamie. My apologies. Listen, this is what's going on. People need to know. You know, the reason why welfare reform is required is because there are so many people taking money from the state who shouldn't be taking it. Simple as that. And the only way that we know this is because if we talk about it. I do apologise, Jamie, and you're quite right. You know, you shouldn't have to pay for other people. You shouldn't have to be able to, you know, not go to work and not just better your own life, but somehow pay for somebody else's. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's like I remember finding that an MP from somewhere in Derbyshire was living in the same place I was living in the same square. I met him one day on the way to work, and I said, "Oh, great!" I said, "Now I'm paying for 2 flats here, one for me and one for you." Brilliant. He wasn't that impressed. I don't think he won the last election. I don't know. I haven't seen him for a while. Anyway, it's competition time. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets in Manchester on July the 19th. We'll also put you up in a hotel and give you £5,000 of spending money. Here's everything you need to know and how to enter.
On iArcade, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, for the chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and £5,000 spending money. Text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m, and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. Good luck, yeah? Sorted.
Sorted, yeah, 9:51. Edward says this, Mike, what does Tim Davie have to do to get fired? Pedo Hugh running rampant under his watch. Tim's not fired. Interviewing terrorists for documentaries. Tim's not fired. Letting hate speech live on primetime TV. Tim, so far, not fired. Well, maybe that will change. I think he's surely the skids have got to be under him now, for heaven's sake. Coming up, we're going to be taking a couple of your calls. We've got much more to do. We've got a few minutes to do it. It's 9:52.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. This is, of course, the home of common sense, 9:55. Apparently there's a knife amnesty going on. I didn't know about that. Apparently you can put your knives, your ninja swords, ahead of the ninja sword ban. I guess you can put them into a Home Office knife bin. I don't know, if you see one knocking around, if you happen to have any ninja swords, drop them in. A lot of people saying that these calls of out at Wimbledon are being made by AI. I don't understand what's going on. We have to get to the bottom of this. Kish in Greater Manchester says the calls of out are pre-recorded voices. Susie says, as I understand it, they are recordings of line judges. And why are they recording them when they've just got rid of them? Surely they got rid of them so they didn't have to hear them. According to June, it says seemingly it's the AI that controls the out call based on the Hawkeye camera, different voices in different courts. Doesn't sound right to me. Sounds mad. Fiona's here in West Sussex, wants to talk about Pip. Hello, Fiona.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. What have you got for us?
So, it's just that I run my my daughter's sort of PIP and before that disability living allowance applications. She's got autism and ADHD.
Right.
And I put in our most recent review application in September, and I actually asked at the time how long it was going to be before we got an answer, and I was told it was going to be over a year.
A year?
And also, if it did take over a year, nothing would change with the payments, and if we got past the end of March, it would always be at least another year before they stopped anyway. And in fact, it only took 6 months, which I was really surprised about because normally they overpromise and it takes longer than you expect. But I talked to some therapists that I know, and apparently that pattern has been quite widespread. Other people have also found that their applications have been fast-tracked.
Right. And so you got so she gets assistance. I mean, how do they base? How much do they know to give her, and when do they know to give it?
Yeah, well, they've never actually seen her, and she's been getting it for like 8 years. And
8 years.
Yeah, well, she's always always had autism,
right.
And it's always, if you like, we really did need the help when she was younger.
Right.
She's 20 now. We just it was really, really difficult. I mean, needs quite a lot of therapy, and
so it was to pay for therapy, in other words.
Yeah, and to go to autism groups.
Yeah.
We also it takes her longer to learn things.
Right.
So when she was learning to drive, it took her like 2 years.
Right.
And you know how much that kind of costs.
Sure. So can you say how much she gets? Is that, I don't wish to pry.
I can actually. She gets £750 a month.
Right.
And we think it's too much.
Okay.
And it's doubled in 5 years.
And what's it supposed to actually physically cover? I mean, do they give it to you as an amount, or do they give it to you to cover specific things?
No, it's just lands in her bank account every month.
Right. So it's not based on you telling them that this is what A costs or B costs.
No.
They just give you like a lump sum.
Yeah, you have to fill in quite a long form.
Right.
Which asks how difficult you find things.
Right.
Okay. And some of them are physical things, and some of them are social things.
Uh-huh.
And that's the thing, is because although she's got a lifetime condition, because hopefully of all the therapy and stuff and all the the care we've been able to give her when she was younger, she's actually less disabled now than she used to be.
Okay. Well, that's good. So hopefully, at some point, they'll recheck it maybe and reduce it. Fiona, listen, I've got to run. Thank you for your call. Fiona in West Sussex. Seems very arbitrary, this whole PIP business. Julie Hartley-Pruitt here. Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I mean, we've discovered this morning that, you know, you get a lot of money from the state for all sorts of things.
Well, the main thing also is once you get certain pension payments, you're then eligible for other payments, like your housing benefits. But again, the whole thing is about, you know, it's now going to be about only new claimants, not previous claimants, even though we've seen a massive ballooning in the number of people